Embryology is the study of how life quietly comes into being. It is the science of transformation, the story of how a single microscopic cell becomes a living, breathing human being. In this world of soft beginnings, everything unfolds in silence. There is no sound as the first cell divides, no motion that the naked eye can see. Yet within that stillness, the most intricate choreography of life is already underway. It is a process older than humanity itself, an ancient pattern written in the language of biology, repeating again and again in every new generation. To understand embryology is to understand the calm continuity of life. Every human being, no matter how unique, begins in the same way. Each of us was once a single cell, formed from the union of two others, a sperm from the father and an egg from the mother. Inside that union rests the entire blueprint for what a person will become. The color of the eyes, the curve of the hands, the pattern of the heartbeat, the very rhythm of growth. From this one cell, the story of an individual begins to unfold, a story that takes place over weeks and months within the protective darkness of the womb, guided not by conscious thought but by nature's quiet precision. For most of human history, this process was invisible. People could see the newborn child, but not the long and delicate journey that led to its arrival. It was not until the invention of the microscope and later the refinement of imaging technologies that scientists began to glimpse this secret world. Within those early observations, humanity discovered something extraordinary, that life is both fragile and incredibly ordered. What might appear to be a simple act of growth is in fact a masterpiece of coordination. Millions of cellular decisions take place every second, each one responding to subtle signals, each one building upon the last to form tissues, organs, and systems. In the earliest moments of existence, the embryo is no larger than a grain of salt, and yet even then, its cells are already communicating, exchanging tiny bursts of chemical information that will determine their fate. Some will become nerve cells, others muscle, others skin or blood. Each has a purpose waiting to be revealed at the proper time. This order is not imposed from outside, but written into the very material of the cell itself, the DNA. Within those spiraling molecules lies the code of life, an instruction manual inherited from countless generations before. Embryology shows that growth is not random but purposeful. The zygote, that first single cell, does not simply multiply. It differentiates. As it divides, it begins to assign roles to its descendants, marking some cells for specific destinies. Over time, clusters form, each one devoted to a particular function, to create bone, to build muscle, to construct the heart or the eyes. It is a symphony without conductor, a harmony arising from countless players following the same hidden score. This gentle precision extends beyond the human species. Every living thing, from birds and fish to trees and flowers, undergoes some version of this process. Embryology connects all of life in a shared narrative of formation and transformation. The shape may differ, the timing may change, but the principles are universal. In the heart of an egg or the seed of a plant, life begins with division, differentiation, and organization. The same molecules that guide a human embryo's growth are echoed in simpler creatures, linking all of biology through common ancestry and ancient design. When we observe the beginnings of life, we are witnessing not a single event but a sequence of miracles repeated in quiet precision. Within days of conception, the fertilized cell divides into 2, then 4, then 8. Each new cell carries the same genetic information as the first, yet as they multiply, they begin to take on unique roles. Soon, a small cluster forms, and inside it, a hollow cavity develops. This structure will become the blastocyst, a tiny sphere ready to implant into the lining of the uterus. From there, the embryo will begin its deeper journey, attaching to the mother's body, and drawing nourishment through newly formed vessels. All of this occurs before most people even realize that life has begun. The earliest stages of development pass unnoticed, unfolding in perfect silence. Yet if one could observe it closely, one would see an extraordinary balance: growth without chaos, motion without disturbance, creation without noise. Each process is governed by the laws of biochemistry, guided by gradients of molecules that tell the cells where to go and what to become. It is an unfolding more delicate than any machine, more precise than any human design. There is something deeply soothing about this order. In a world filled with noise and movement, the embryo's universe is one of calm constancy. It is protected, warm, and dark, existing within rhythms older than memory. Even the heartbeat that will one day quicken with emotion and effort begins first as a gentle flicker, a tiny pulse within a translucent body. Embryology reveals that our first experiences are not those of sight or sound, but of rhythm and balance, of expansion and connection. We begin not in isolation, but in unity, sustained by another life while forming our own. Scientists who study embryology often describe it as a field where biology becomes poetry. It bridges the physical and the mysterious, the measurable and the miraculous. The cells can be counted, their chemical pathways mapped, and yet the totality of what they create, a human being capable of thought, memory, and love, seems to surpass what can be fully described. Within the embryo, nature expresses its most elegant truth, that complexity can arise from simplicity, and that from the smallest beginnings, something vast can emerge. As the embryo grows, it reflects patterns found throughout nature, the way cells spiral outward, the way they branch like rivers, echoes the structures seen in galaxies, trees, and seashells. The same mathematics that governs the spiral of a snail shell or the curl of a fern can be found in the geometry of embryonic development. It is as if the universe itself whispers through biology, repeating ancient designs in living form. Embryology also reminds us that growth requires time and patience. Each stage of development must follow the next in precise order. To rush or skip even a single step would threaten the entire process. The embryo's slow unfolding is an act of natural wisdom, progress through careful pacing. It does not hurry, for each cell must be ready to receive its signals, and each structure must mature in harmony with the rest. This quiet timing ensures balance, stability, and the perfect conditions for life to emerge whole. Even before the embryo resembles a human form, it already holds the potential for everything that will be. In that early cluster of cells are the foundations of the nervous system, the digestive tract, the circulatory network. What appears shapeless is, in truth, a map of future complexity. To the observer, it may look like a simple sphere, but within that sphere is every possibility of identity, intelligence, and individuality. In many ways, embryology is not just the study of beginnings, but the study of continuity. Every cell within the embryo traces its ancestry back through time, through parents, grandparents, and countless generations before them, all the way to the earliest forms of life on Earth. Each human birth is therefore not a separate event, but part of an unbroken lineage, stretching billions of years into the past. Life does not start anew. It continues, reshaped and reimagined in every generation. As you rest and listen, imagine this process unfolding slowly, peacefully. Picture a quiet darkness filled with soft light, where a single cell divides and multiplies with effortless grace. Imagine the rhythm of life echoing faintly, like a heartbeat in the distance. Each moment of growth is patient and deliberate, each movement gentle and assured. In this stillness, you are witnessing the earliest poetry of existence, a reminder that life, at its core, is a calm and continuous act of creation. Embryology, then, is not merely a subject of science. It is a meditation on being. It teaches us that from the simplest beginnings, infinite complexity can arise, and that within every human story lies a moment of quiet wonder, the first spark of life, unfolding in perfect, timeless peace. 2. The story of life on Earth. Before the story of a single embryo can be told, one must look further back beyond the quiet chamber of the womb, beyond even the first living cell to the ancient origins of life itself. Every new human being, every plant and creature that has ever lived, carries within it a memory of beginnings that reach back billions of years. In the stillness of early Earth, long before oceans teemed with movement or skies filled with breath, chemistry and chance began a slow and silent collaboration that would one day make the study of embryology possible. In those first eons, the planet was young and restless. The air was heavy with gases, methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and steam, and the ground glowed with volcanic heat. The surface was inhospitable, yet in the chaos, the conditions for life were quietly forming. Lightning flickered across stormy skies, striking the oceans below and sparking reactions among the simple molecules drifting there. From these reactions came the first organic compounds, carbon-based molecules capable of forming bonds, capable of storing energy, capable of change. Over millions of years, the oceans became vast laboratories of creation. Simple molecules joined to make amino acids, sugars, and lipids. From these, chains began to form long strands that folded and coiled, behaving almost like primitive machines. Some could capture energy from sunlight or heat. Others could bind to minerals on the ocean floor. And within this slow and steady progression, a remarkable transformation occurred. Molecules that could copy themselves began to appear. They were fragile and imperfect, but their imperfections were not flaws. They were opportunities. Each time these molecules replicated, they introduced small variations. And among those variations, some survived longer than others. This was the earliest whisper of evolution, the process that would eventually shape every form of life that followed. These self-replicating molecules gave rise to the first protocells, tiny bubbles of chemistry surrounded by thin membranes. They were not yet alive in the way we define life, but they were something close. They could contain reactions, maintain a boundary between inside and out, and sometimes divide into smaller bubbles. With time, these protocells learned to capture energy from their surroundings, to use it for self-maintenance, and to pass on their structure through division. From such simple beginnings came the first true cells, the ancestors of all living things. Life's early forms were humble, single-celled organisms that floated in the sea, feeding on simple nutrients and sunlight. These early microbes left behind faint traces of their existence in rocks, some more than 3.5 billion years old. Over the ages, they grew more complex. Some learned to harness the sun's energy through photosynthesis, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. That oxygen changed everything. Slowly, it accumulated in the atmosphere, turning the sky from orange to blue, and enabling new forms of metabolism to emerge. For more than 2 billion years, life remained microscopic, unseen and unnoticed in the vastness of Earth's oceans. Yet, during this long age of quiet evolution, the foundations of all future development were being laid. Inside those early cells, DNA took form, molecules so stable and precise that it could preserve life's instructions from one generation to the next. With DNA came the possibility of complexity. The genetic code, composed of only 4 chemical letters, became life's universal language. Every living thing, from bacteria to human beings, speaks it. Eventually, cells began to cooperate. Some joined together, sharing resources and protection. A few absorbed other cells, forming partnerships that would become permanent. The mitochondria that power our own cells today are descendants of such ancient collaborations, once free-living bacteria that took up residence inside larger hosts. This merging of life into life was one of evolution's most elegant inventions, giving rise to the eukaryotic cell, the type found in all animals and plants. These new cells could grow larger, contain specialized structures, and divide with precision. They became the building blocks of multicellular life, a development that would change the face of the planet. Over time, single cells began to work together as tissues and colonies, communicating through chemical signals. They formed patterns, developed symmetry, and specialized in their functions. These early multicellular organisms were the first to experience a kind of embryology, the process by which one cell becomes many, and many cells take on distinct roles. In them, we see the origins of the very principles that guide human development today: differentiation, organization, and growth. From the oceans arose soft-bodied creatures, then shells, skeletons. The Cambrian period, about 540 million years ago, marked an explosion of forms, the sudden flourishing of life's imagination. Within a few million years, the seas filled with animals of every shape and structure: trilobites, worms, corals, and the first fish. Each one began as a single cell that divided, folded, and transformed, guided by the same quiet patterns that shaped the embryos of modern species. Our history of life continued to unfold in waves. Plants conquered the land, adapting to breathe air and stand tall against gravity. Insects followed, crawling and then flying, pollinating the new forests. Amphibians left the water for the first time, giving rise to reptiles, birds, and mammals. Across each of these transitions, the story of embryology deepened. Every creature carried within its development a record of its past. Even in humans, traces of ancient ancestry remain: the gill-like arches in early embryos, the tail that briefly appears before being absorbed, the layered structure of the brain, echoing evolutionary stages. In this way, embryology becomes not only the study of how an individual life forms, but also a living history of how life itself evolved. Each embryo, in its quiet progression, reflects the grand narrative of evolution in miniature. It begins as a single cell, as life once did, and moves through stages that resemble the early forms of Earth's creatures. This reflection is not a coincidence, but a memory carried in DNA, a continuity of form that links every being to the deep time of the planet. As evolution shaped life, it also refined the mechanisms of reproduction. Complex organisms required precise systems to ensure the continuity of their kind. The development of eggs, sperm, and internal gestation were milestones in this progression. In mammals, including humans, embryology became an intimate collaboration between two bodies, the mother and the developing child. The womb evolved as a sanctuary of growth, allowing life to unfold within shelter rather than in the open elements. This shift allowed for longer gestation, greater complexity, and the nurturing of fragile offspring who would not survive on their own. Through all these epochs, one principle remained constant: life seeks to continue. The forms may change, the environments may shift, yet the underlying drive to divide, to grow, to evolve, persists without fail. Embryology is the modern expression of that ancient persistence. It is evolution seen not across ages, but within a single lifetime. The transformation of one cell into many. The birth of individuality from shared design. To study the origins of life on Earth is to glimpse the quiet patience of time. It reminds us that everything we are began long before our bodies took shape. The molecules in our cells were forged in ancient oceans, and the elements that compose us were born in stars. The carbon in our bones, the iron in our blood, the calcium in our teeth, all are relics of cosmic creation. The embryo's gentle unfolding is part of a much larger story, one that began with the birth of the universe itself. As you imagine this long chain of transformation, allow your thoughts to settle on the simplicity at its heart, from lifeless matter to living cell, from single organism to complex being. Each step unfolded with the same patience that now guides a human embryo's growth. Evolution and embryology are two reflections of the same truth. Life, in all its forms, moves steadily toward expression. It does not rush. It simply continues. The story of life on Earth is therefore not only a scientific account, but a meditation on persistence. Every cell that divides within an embryo today is a continuation of the first division that ever occurred in the ancient seas. Each breath we take is connected to that long lineage of adaptation and renewal. Life began billions of years ago, yet it remains new with every generation, each embryo carrying forward the quiet wonder of beginnings. 3. Reproduction and renewal. The continuity of life depends upon one of nature's most profound and graceful processes, reproduction. It is through reproduction that life renews itself, generation after generation, keeping the great chain of existence unbroken. Every living creature, from the simplest single-celled organism to the complexity of humankind, participates in this act of renewal. It is a process both delicate and powerful, quiet yet cosmic in its significance. To study reproduction is to witness how life perpetuates itself through balance, precision, and time. In human beings, reproduction is a story that unfolds not in haste, but in harmony. It begins long before conception, within the intricate structures of the body that have been shaped and refined through millions of years of evolution. These systems work in concert to produce the essential ingredients of life, the gametes, or sex cells, that will one day unite to form a new individual. In their simplicity, these cells carry within them the entire potential of a future person, the traits inherited from both parents, the possibilities of thought, emotion, and consciousness waiting to awaken. Within the male body, the process of sperm production takes place in the testes, paired organs that reside in the scrotum just outside the body's core. Their position, cooler than internal body temperature, provides the optimal environment for the creation of these remarkably specialized cells. The process, known as spermatogenesis, is continuous, ensuring that at any given time, millions of sperm are ready to take part in life's eternal dance. Each sperm cell is small and streamlined, its head containing tightly packed DNA, its midsection filled with mitochondria for energy, and its long tail designed for motion. They are built for a singular purpose: to reach and fertilize the egg. Within the female body, the preparation for reproduction follows a cyclical rhythm, coordinated through hormones that act like gentle signals guiding each stage. The ovaries, resting on either side of the uterus, contain thousands of immature eggs called oocytes. From puberty onward, one of these eggs matures each month, encased within a protective follicle. As it grows, it releases hormones that prepare the body for potential conception. The uterus, lined with a soft layer called the endometrium, thickens in anticipation, becoming a nurturing bed, ready to receive new life. This rhythmic cycle, often unnoticed, yet deeply constant, reflects the natural order of renewal. It is guided by a precise interplay of hormones: estrogen, progesterone, follicle-stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone, each rising and falling in turn. Together, they orchestrate ovulation, the moment when the mature egg is released into the fallopian tube, where it may encounter sperm. If fertilization does not occur, the cycle gently resets, shedding the uterine lining and preparing to begin anew. In this way, the female body moves in harmony with the passage of time, embodying nature's patience and precision. When sperm and egg finally meet, it is often within the fallopian tube, a narrow, delicate passage connecting the ovary to the uterus. The journey of the sperm to reach this point is extraordinary. After ejaculation, millions of sperm begin to swim upward through the cervix, guided by subtle chemical signals and rhythmic contractions of the female reproductive tract. Most will never reach their destination. Only a small fraction find the egg, and only one will successfully penetrate its outer layer. When that moment occurs, the world changes quietly and completely. The union of sperm and egg marks the beginning of a new organism, a single cell known as the zygote. Within this cell, the genetic material of two individuals merges, forming a complete set of DNA that is entirely unique. Half of the chromosomes come from the father, half from the mother, and together they determine every aspect of the new being, from physical traits to predispositions, from the shape of the hands to the rhythm of the heart. At this point, the process of embryology truly begins. Reproduction, however, is more than a biological event. It is also a reflection of continuity and transformation. Through it, life ensures its survival, not by remaining the same, but by adapting. Every new generation carries slight variations in its genetic code, the result of recombination and mutation. These changes, though small, accumulate over time, allowing species to evolve, to respond to new challenges, and to thrive in changing environments. In this way, reproduction becomes both a preservation of what has come before and a quiet act of innovation. In multicellular organisms, and especially in humans, reproduction also takes on layers of meaning that go beyond the physical. It represents connection, care, and the handing down of knowledge and memory. The human body may be the vessel through which life renews itself, but the process is accompanied by emotional and cultural dimensions that reflect our shared humanity. Across cultures and ages, the creation of life has been regarded with awe, a symbol of continuity, of family, and of the mysterious union between body and spirit. From a biological perspective, the precision of reproduction is astonishing. Every stage, from the release of the egg to the implantation of the embryo, is regulated by microscopic cues. The sperm must recognize the egg's chemical signals. The membranes of both must fuse in exact synchrony. After fertilization, the egg's surface changes to prevent any other sperm from entering, protecting the integrity of the genetic material within. The zygote then begins its slow division, one cell becoming two, two becoming four, and so on, the first steps toward a new life. Even as this microscopic transformation takes place, the larger environment of the body responds. Hormones signal the uterus to maintain its thickened lining, ensuring that when the embryo arrives, it will find a place to implant and grow. Blood vessels expand, nutrients accumulate, and the body begins to adapt to the presence of new life. Every element, from the cellular to the systemic, participates in the shared goal of continuation. Reproduction also depends upon balance, a harmony between stability and change. In this balance lies the resilience of life. The mechanisms that allow for fertilization are delicate, yet they persist even in the face of variation and imperfection. Nature allows for countless possibilities, ensuring that even though not every union results in new life, the potential remains constant. Through this vast network of attempts, successes, and losses, the cycle of renewal continues unbroken. When we observe the natural world, we see this principle repeated in every form of life. Flowers open to release pollen that drifts on the wind. Fish lay eggs in the currents of rivers. Birds build nests. Each species has its own method, perfectly attuned to its environment, yet all share the same purpose: to pass forward the spark of life. Whether through a seed, an egg, or a human embryo, reproduction is nature's affirmation that existence will endure. In the context of human experience, this process takes on profound depth. Each birth connects past and future, linking generations in an unbroken chain that stretches beyond memory. The DNA that shapes a child carries echoes of ancestors long gone, their features and traits whispered across centuries. In this way, reproduction is not simply the making of a body, but the continuation of a story written in the language of life itself. To contemplate reproduction is to be reminded of the unity of all living things. Every organism, regardless of its form, participates in the same rhythm: birth, growth, reproduction, and rest. It is a rhythm that sustains the earth, cycling endlessly through time. From this rhythm arises diversity, resilience, and within that endless motion, each new beginning carries the quiet promise of renewal. As you rest and imagine this process, picture the calm persistence of life across generations. Think of the countless living things that have shared this cycle before you, each contributing to the great tapestry of existence. The same forces that guided the first living cells still guide us now, shaping every embryo, every seed, every act of creation. Reproduction is not merely an event in time, it is the pulse of life itself, steady, patient, and eternal. 4. The meeting of two cells. The story of every human being begins with a single, quiet meeting, deep within the body, in a moment so small it cannot be felt. Two cells come together, the sperm from the father and the egg from the mother. Each carries half of the genetic code required to form a new life. And when they unite, they create something entirely unique, a being that has never existed before and will never exist again in the same form. This encounter is both simple and astonishing. A biological event so ordinary it happens countless times each day across the world, and yet so profound that it is the foundation of all human existence. Before this meeting occurs, both the sperm and the egg have traveled long and intricate paths of preparation. In the male body, sperm are produced continuously within the testes, formed through the process of spermatogenesis. The cells divide and mature in tightly coiled structures called seminiferous tubules, where they gradually develop their streamlined shape: a compact head carrying genetic material, a midsection filled with energy-producing mitochondria, and a tail designed to propel them forward. Each sperm is minuscule, yet purpose-built for motion, for endurance, for the long journey ahead. The egg, or ovum, has a very different story. In the female body, the eggs are formed before birth, resting in quiet dormancy within the ovaries for years, sometimes decades. Each egg waits patiently in its microscopic chamber, called a follicle, surrounded by protective cells. With each menstrual cycle, hormones awaken a small group of these follicles, encouraging them to grow. Usually, only one completes its development, maturing into an ovum ready for release. This release, known as ovulation, marks the moment when the egg begins its own journey, leaving the ovary and entering the fallopian tube, where it will drift slowly toward the uterus. For about 24 hours, it is capable of being fertilized. It waits, motionless and still, within the gentle currents of the tube, while the body prepares for what might come. The sperm's journey, in contrast, is one of movement and persistence. During ejaculation, hundreds of millions of sperm are released, yet only a fraction will ever approach the egg. Once inside the female reproductive tract, they begin a long and perilous passage. They swim through the cervix, into the uterus, and upward into the fallopian tubes, guided by rhythmic contractions of the surrounding muscles and subtle chemical signals. The environment they encounter is not uniform. It changes in texture, temperature, and chemistry, testing each cell's resilience. Many will lose their way or be swept aside, but a few will continue, driven by the quiet force of life's determination. The moment of fertilization takes place in the ampulla, the widest section of the fallopian tube. Here, under conditions of warmth and protection, the egg and sperm finally meet. The egg, though passive in appearance, is not a mere vessel waiting to be filled. Its outer surface, called the zona pellucida, is a complex matrix of proteins designed to recognize and respond to the sperm's presence. As the sperm approach, they must undergo a process known as capacitation, during which their membranes change, making them capable of penetrating the egg's protective layers. This process is like a silent preparation, transforming the sperm from simple carriers of DNA into active participants in creation. When the leading sperm reaches the egg, binds to receptors on the zona pellucida and releases enzymes from its acrosome, a small cap at the head of the cell. These enzymes dissolve a path through the egg's outer coating, allowing the sperm to push forward. This journey is both precise and fleeting. Only one sperm will succeed. When its membrane fuses with the eggs, a wave of electrical and chemical changes sweeps across the egg's surface, instantly preventing any other sperm from entering. This protective reaction ensures that the embryo will have exactly the right number of chromosomes, half from each parent, no more and no less. In that instant of fusion, something extraordinary occurs. The genetic material of two individuals combines, forming a single nucleus containing 46 chromosomes. These chromosomes hold the DNA that defines every aspect of the new being, not just physical features like hair color or height, but also thousands of tiny instructions governing development, growth, and function. This new cell, the zygote, is a complete blueprint of life. It carries within it the continuity of the human story, linking past and future in one microscopic sphere of potential. After fertilization, the zygote rests briefly before beginning its first act of creation. It splits into 2 cells, then 4, then 8, each carrying the same genetic information but beginning to assume slightly different roles. These early divisions happen without growth in size. Instead, the cells become smaller and more numerous, like a quiet multiplication of purpose. During this time, the zygote slowly drifts down the fallopian tube toward the uterus, moved by tiny hair-like structures called cilia that line the tube's walls. This journey takes several days, and by the time it arrives, the zygote has become a small cluster of cells, known as the morula, resembling a mulberry in shape and texture. As the morula continues to divide, it begins to form a hollow center, becoming what scientists call a blastocyst. Within this structure are 2 main parts: the inner cell mass, which will become the embryo itself, and the outer layer of cells, which will form the placenta and supporting tissues. This delicate organization marks the first step toward differentiation, the process by which cells begin to specialize and take on unique functions. Even at this early stage, the foundation of the body's future systems is being laid. The meeting of sperm and egg, though seemingly instantaneous, is the result of countless layers of preparation and timing. Every detail must align: the release of the egg, the readiness of the sperm, the openness of the uterine environment, the exact moment of contact. A slight variation in any of these conditions, and the meeting might not occur. Yet, when it does, the precision is extraordinary, a seamless coordination that has evolved over millions of years to ensure the continuity of life. It is humbling to consider that everything that defines a human being, every thought, every heartbeat, every breath that will one day be taken, begins with this microscopic encounter. The meeting of 2 cells is the moment when potential becomes possibility, when the spark of existence is kindled. There is no noise, no visible motion, no light to mark the event. Yet from this invisible union, an entire life begins to unfold, guided by the same natural laws that have shaped every creature before and every one that will come after. As the blastocyst approaches the uterus, it prepares for the next great stage: implantation. Soon it will attach to the uterine wall, drawing nourishment from the mother's body and continuing its silent expansion. But even before that moment, the embryo already holds within it a complete instruction set, ready to begin the long and graceful process of growth. In this way, the meeting of 2 cells represents more than the beginning of life. It is a symbol of balance and cooperation. 2 halves come together to make a whole, each contributing equally, each completing the other. It is an act of unity, written into the very design of nature. Across all species, this pattern repeats endlessly. from the smallest microbe to the largest mammal. In every instance, it carries the same message. Life is sustained not by isolation, but by connection. As you imagine this meeting, let your thoughts settle on the stillness of that moment. The quiet merging of two cells, invisible to the eye yet infinite in meaning. Picture them joining gently, their contents blending, their boundaries dissolving. From this union, a single spark of creation begins its slow unfolding, carrying forward the ancient rhythm of life that has endured through time. The meeting of two cells is, in essence, the beginning of everything, a silent promise that the story of existence will continue. 5. The journey of the zygote. Once the egg and sperm have united, the quiet story of a new life begins its first journey. The zygote, a single cell now carrying the full blueprint of a human being, rests briefly in the gentle environment of the fallopian tube. It is here that the miracle of transformation continues. As the zygote prepares to travel toward the uterus, its destination and future home for the months to come. Though invisible to the eye, this journey marks one of the most profound transitions in biology. The passage from a single cell to a growing organism composed of many. Every division, every motion, unfolds with patient precision, guided by the laws of nature and the code written within the zygote's DNA. In the first hours after fertilization, the zygote appears still and unremarkable, a sphere smaller than the width of a human hair. Yet inside its nucleus, the command center of the cell is preparing for division. The genetic material from both parents, once separate, now forms matching pairs of chromosomes, aligning perfectly for replication. This organization ensures that as the cell divides, each new cell will carry the same complete set of instructions. And so, with quiet efficiency, the zygote undergoes its first mitotic division. It splits into two identical cells, each one a mirror of the original whole. These two cells, called blastomeres, remain tightly bound within the protective outer layer, the zona pellucida. This translucent shell safeguards the early embryo as it continues its slow descent through the fallopian tube. The journey is a gradual one. The zygote does not propel itself, but is gently carried along by the rhythmic motion of the tube's cilia, tiny, hair-like structures that wave in soft synchrony. Smooth muscle contractions in the walls of the fallopian tube add to this movement, helping to guide the embryo toward the uterus. This journey lasts around 3 to 5 days, a period of continuous division and development. During this time, the zygote becomes a cluster of cells, each division doubling its number. 4, then 8, then 16. Despite the multiplication, the total size remains unchanged. The zona pellucida holds the cluster within its boundaries, keeping the early embryo compact and protected. At this stage, the embryo is known as a morula, a name derived from the Latin word for mulberry, reflecting its bumpy, clustered appearance. The morula consists of a dense ball of cells surrounded by the same transparent membrane that once enclosed the egg. Though all the cells look alike under a microscope, subtle differences are already emerging. Some are beginning to specialize, taking on early roles that will later determine their destiny. The outer cells will one day help form the placenta, while the inner cells will become the embryo itself. Even at this microscopic stage, nature is already assigning purpose, directing the quiet choreography that will shape a human form. As the morula continues its journey, it begins to change from within. Fluid seeps into its center, creating a hollow space that pushes the inner cells to one side. This transformation marks the transition from morula to blastocyst, a structure composed of two distinct parts, the inner cell mass and the outer trophoblast layer. The inner mass, tucked neatly to one side, holds the future embryo, the cells that will give rise to the body, organs, and tissues. The trophoblast, forming the outer shell, will become the interface with the mother's body, developing into the placenta and supporting membranes that sustain growth. Between them lies a cavity filled with nourishing fluid, cushioning the cells as they prepare for the next phase of life. The blastocyst's emergence signals that the embryo is nearly ready to implant, but before it can attach to the uterine lining, it must first escape the confines of the zona pellucida. This process, called hatching, is both delicate and essential. Enzymes released by the growing blastocyst thin and dissolve the outer shell until a small opening appears. Through this opening, the embryo gently expands and slips free, ready to make contact with the uterus. It is an extraordinary transition, a moment when the embryo moves from the protected isolation of its shell to the openness of a new environment. Once free, it drifts toward the uterine wall, guided by molecular signals and gravitational currents within the womb. Meanwhile, the uterus has been preparing for this arrival. Under the influence of hormones like estrogen and progesterone, the lining of the uterus, called the endometrium, has thickened and become rich with blood vessels. This tissue is soft and receptive, a welcoming landscape for the tiny traveler. The timing must be perfect. If the embryo arrives too early, the lining may not yet be ready to receive it. If too late, it may have already begun to thin. Yet nature's timing is rarely mistaken. When the blastocyst comes into contact with the uterine surface, chemical communication begins immediately. The outer trophoblast cells adhere to the lining, anchoring themselves with tiny projections. Over the next several hours, they will begin to invade the tissue gently, embedding the embryo within the maternal environment. As implantation begins, the mother's body and the embryo enter a silent dialogue. The trophoblast releases signals that encourage the uterus to accept it, suppressing immune responses that might otherwise treat the embryo as foreign. At the same time, hormones are produced that sustain the uterine lining, ensuring that it will not shed as it does during a normal menstrual cycle. One of these hormones, human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG, will later be detected in pregnancy tests, the first measurable sign that a new life has taken hold. Inside the blastocyst, the inner cell mass continues to divide and organize, forming layers that will soon differentiate into the structures of the human body. Each cell carries within it the complete instructions for development, yet only certain portions of the genetic code will be activated in each, determining what type of tissue it will become. Some will give rise to the nervous system, others to muscles, others still to the organs that sustain life. This selective activation, guided by biochemical cues, is one of nature's quiet miracles, a symphony of specialization that unfolds without error or oversight. During this entire process, the embryo remains incredibly small, no larger than a pinhead, yet its potential is immeasurable. It is already an organism in motion, growing, adapting, and communicating with its environment. The journey from fertilization to implantation is one of both fragility and resilience. Many embryos never complete it, succumbing to genetic irregularities or environmental challenges. But for those that do, the reward is extraordinary. A successful union between embryo and mother, a secure foothold from which the story of growth can continue. In the stillness of this process, one can sense the timeless rhythm of life at work. Each step, from the first cell division to the gentle embedding in the uterine wall, mirrors a larger truth that creation is both delicate and determined. The embryo's journey is not one of force or speed, but of patience. It advances cell by cell, guided by signals too subtle for human perception, yet perfectly understood by the body itself. It is a passage that reflects the nature of life, purposeful, interconnected, and serene. By the time implantation is complete, the embryo has become fully enclosed within the uterine lining, protected and nourished by its new environment. The trophoblast will soon begin to form the earliest version of the placenta, a network through which oxygen and nutrients will pass from mother to child. The embryo, now surrounded by warmth and sustenance, begins to settle into its new rhythm of growth. It has survived the first great voyage of its existence, crossing from the open space of the fallopian tube into the sheltered haven of the womb. As you imagine this scene, think of the slow, drifting journey of the zygote, a tiny sphere of potential carried along by gentle currents, dividing quietly as it moves. Every step of the way, it follows an ancient pattern, one that has unfolded countless times before and will continue for countless generations to come. The journey of the zygote is the first act in the long story of life, the opening chapter of every human existence. It reminds us that even the smallest and most fragile beginnings can travel far, carried forward by the patient hands of nature. 6. The blastocyst and its arrival. After several days of gentle drifting, the zygote's long journey through the fallopian tube draws to its close. What began as a single cell has now become a delicate sphere of life called the blastocyst. Within its tiny frame lies everything needed to build a human being, a blueprint more intricate than any design ever written by hand. At this stage, the blastocyst has reached the uterus, a warm and receptive chamber that has been quietly preparing for its arrival. It is here that the next great transformation will occur, one that marks the beginning of the embryo's true relationship with the mother's body. The story of the blastocyst is one of arrival, adaptation, and union, a moment when new life finally finds its place to rest and grow. The blastocyst, though microscopic, is a marvel of natural architecture. It is a hollow sphere, its outer layer composed of cells known as the trophoblast, while its inner cluster, the inner cell mass, clings gently to one side. Between them lies a cavity filled with fluid that gives the structure its rounded shape. The trophoblast's role is crucial. It will soon form the placenta and the membranes that protect the embryo, acting as both guardian and bridge. The inner cell mass, by contrast, holds the essence of the future organism. Within it reside the cells that will eventually form every tissue and organ, from the beating heart to the intricate folds of the brain. Together, these layers embody the principle of cooperation that defines all living systems, separate parts working in harmony to sustain a single purpose. Upon entering the uterus, the blastocyst drifts freely for a brief time, suspended in the fluid-filled space of the uterine cavity. It does not immediately attach, for both embryo and uterus must be ready for the exchange that is about to take place. The uterine lining, known as the endometrium, has thickened under the influence of hormones like estrogen and progesterone, transforming into a richly vascularized landscape. Tiny glands secrete nutrients into the surrounding fluid, creating an environment perfectly suited to nurture the arriving embryo. The timing is exquisite, a window of only a few days during which the uterus is fully receptive. If the blastocyst arrives too early or too late, the opportunity for implantation may be lost. Yet in most cases, nature's rhythm remains steady, and the alignment is perfect. Before implantation can occur, the blastocyst must first free itself from the protective casing that has enclosed it since fertilization. This casing, the zona pellucida, served as a shield throughout the embryo's journey, preventing premature attachment and protecting it from damage. But now, it must be shed to allow direct contact with the maternal tissue. Through a process known as hatching, the blastocyst releases enzymes that thin and dissolve the outer shell. Gradually, a small opening forms, and the embryo expands outward, pushing through the gap, like a flower unfurling from its bud. Once free, the blastocyst floats, unencumbered, its trophoblast cells now exposed and ready to establish contact with the uterine wall. When the blastocyst first touches the endometrium, the interaction is subtle, almost like a whisper. The trophoblast cells sense the chemical signals secreted by the uterine lining, recognizing them as an invitation. In response, they begin to adhere, forming molecular bonds that anchor the embryo in place. This marks the beginning of implantation, a process that will unfold over several days. Slowly, the trophoblast begins to penetrate the endometrium, extending delicate projections called villi that draw the embryo deeper into the maternal tissue. These villi will later develop into part of the placenta, the structure that allows nutrients and oxygen to pass from mother to child. At the same time, the trophoblast differentiates into two layers. The inner layer, called the cytotrophoblast, remains cellular and organized, while the outer layer, the syncytiotrophoblast, becomes a continuous sheet that invades the endometrial surface. This outer layer acts as the embryo's first connection to the mother's blood supply. By releasing enzymes, it dissolves nearby tissues, allowing the embryo to embed itself more securely. Far from being destructive, this process is one of delicate cooperation. The mother's body responds by growing new blood vessels around the implanted embryo, enclosing it within a nourishing network. During these early days, the inner cell mass also begins its own transformations. It organizes into two distinct layers, the epiblast and the hypoblast. The epiblast will eventually give rise to the embryo proper, forming all the organs and tissues of the body, while the hypoblast contributes to the formation of supporting membranes such as the yolk sac. These layers mark the beginning of the embryo's organization, a faint preview of the complexity to come. Though only a fraction of a millimeter in size, the blastocyst is already alive with motion and change, its cells dividing, migrating, and signaling in silent coordination. The process of implantation represents more than a physical attachment. It is a biological dialogue. The embryo communicates with the mother's body through chemical messengers, ensuring that it is accepted rather than rejected. In most circumstances, the mother's immune system would recognize foreign tissue as something to be eliminated. But in pregnancy, a unique harmony emerges. The trophoblast releases substances that suppress local immune responses, while the mother's body adjusts its defenses to create tolerance. This mutual understanding allows the embryo to remain safe and undisturbed within its new environment. As implantation proceeds, the blastocyst becomes fully embedded within the endometrium. The surrounding tissue grows around it, closing the small opening left behind. The syncytotrophoblast begins to produce human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG, a hormone that signals the body to maintain the uterine lining and prevent menstruation. It is this same hormone that will later appear in the bloodstream and urine, serving as the first detectable sign of pregnancy. Within a week of implantation, the embryo is firmly secured, nestled within a pocket of tissue rich with blood vessels and nutrients. From this point onward, the placenta begins to take shape. What started as extensions of the trophoblast now grow into intricate branches that will form a bridge between mother and child. Through this connection, oxygen and nourishment will flow into the embryo, while waste products will be carried away. It is a system of perfect reciprocity, a balance of giving and receiving that will sustain life until birth. At the same time, new membranes begin to form around the embryo, the amnion, which will fill with protective fluid, and the chorion, which will contribute to the placenta. These structures, though still forming, mark the creation of a complete and self-contained world, a sanctuary in which the embryo will continue to grow in peace. By the end of this phase, the blastocyst has completed its transition from a wandering traveler to a resident of the womb. It has found its place of belonging, where it will be nourished, protected, and allowed to unfold into greater complexity. The transformation from fertilized cell to implanted embryo has taken barely a week. Yet in that short span, the foundations of a lifetime have been set. The genetic code has been activated, the first tissues defined, and the essential relationship between mother and child established. As you imagine this moment, think of the stillness surrounding it, a silence filled not with emptiness, but with potential. Within the soft walls of the uterus, the blastocyst rests like a tiny seed in fertile soil. It is no longer adrift but anchored, drawing strength from its connection to the world around it. The mother's body, attuned to the quiet signals of this new life, responds with warmth and care, altering itself to support what is growing within. Together they form a single rhythm, two lives intertwined in perfect balance. The arrival of the blastocyst marks the beginning of a new era in development. It is the point at which individuality meets continuity, where one generation merges into the next. The embryo that now lies within the womb carries within it the wisdom of ages, the encoded memory of life's persistence across time. From this moment forward, its story will unfold, not in isolation, but as part of the great and unending flow of existence. In this gentle meeting between potential and place, the journey of life finds its first home. 7. Implantation and the start of nourishment. Within the quiet, protective walls of the uterus, a transformation is taking place that is both subtle and extraordinary. The tiny blastocyst, no larger than the head of a pin, has come to rest upon the endometrial lining, the soft, inner surface of the womb. This moment marks the beginning of implantation, the first true connection between mother and child. Though invisible to any observer, it is one of the most significant events in all of development. From this point forward, the embryo will no longer drift freely. It will take root, drawing life and sustenance from the body that shelters it. What follows is a delicate exchange of signals and structures, a quiet conversation written in the language of cells, ensuring that the new life will be welcomed, nourished, and allowed to grow. The initial contact between the blastocyst and the uterine lining is a gentle one. The outer layer of the blastocyst, known as the trophoblast, is specially designed for this purpose. Its cells recognize the chemical cues secreted by the endometrium and respond by adhering softly to the surface. This recognition is not accidental, it is a precise alignment of biological timing and molecular readiness. The uterine lining, enriched with blood vessels and nutrients, has entered a state of receptivity under the influence of progesterone, a hormone that prepares the body for pregnancy. Its cells have become spongy and welcoming, ready to receive the new arrival. Once contact is made, the trophoblast begins its quiet work of embedding the embryo more deeply. It secretes enzymes that gently dissolve small portions of the endometrial surface, allowing the embryo to sink inward, like a seed planting itself into the earth. This process is carefully balanced, assertive enough to secure a firm attachment, yet controlled so as not to harm the mother's tissue. The outermost cells of the trophoblast fuse together, forming a continuous layer known as the syncytiotrophoblast. This remarkable structure has no distinct boundaries between its cells, allowing it to spread smoothly through the maternal tissue, creating tiny channels that will soon connect to the mother's blood vessels. These channels mark the first steps toward forming the placenta, the organ that will sustain the embryo throughout its development. As the syncytiotrophoblast expands, it releases biochemical signals that communicate directly with the mother's body. One of these signals is the hormone human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. This hormone plays a vital role, instructing the corpus luteum, a temporary structure in the ovary, to continue producing progesterone. Without this signal, progesterone levels would fall, and the uterine lining would begin to break down, as it does during menstruation. Instead, HCG ensures that the lining remains intact, maintaining the safe environment the embryo requires. This is the same hormone that later serves as the first indicator of pregnancy, detectable in a simple test. It is a quiet chemical message, affirming that life has taken hold. Meanwhile, within the embryo itself, profound changes are occurring. The inner cell mass has begun to reorganize into two layers, the epiblast and the hypoblast. Together, they form what is known as the bilaminar disc, a simple yet vital structure that will give rise to the entire human body. The epiblast, composed of tall, active cells, will soon become the embryo proper. Every tissue, organ, and system. The hypoblast, lying just beneath it, contributes to the formation of extraembryonic membranes, including the yolk sac, which will temporarily provide nourishment before the placenta is fully functional. These early divisions, though minute, establish the blueprint of life's unfolding architecture. As implantation continues, the embryo becomes completely enclosed within the uterine lining. The opening through which it entered is sealed over by maternal cells, and a thin layer of fibrin, a protein involved in wound healing, closes the surface. The embryo is now surrounded by living tissue, protected from the external environment, and immersed in the nutrients of the uterine wall. It is at this stage that the first primitive exchanges of nourishment begin. The syncytiotrophoblast, in its invasion of the endometrial tissue, opens small spaces that fill with maternal blood and glandular secretions. Through these pools, nutrients and oxygen begin to diffuse toward the embryo, sustaining its rapid growth. Though the embryo is not yet connected by an umbilical cord, this early form of nourishment is enough to maintain its development. The mother's body, ever responsive, continues to modify itself in support of the growing life within. Blood flow to the uterus increases, and the lining becomes even more vascular and glandular. The body's metabolism begins to shift, subtly changing the balance of energy and nutrients to accommodate the new demands of pregnancy. Yet all of this occurs without awareness. The mother may not yet even know that conception has taken place. Deep within, nature is working silently, weaving the threads of connection that will soon bind two lives together. Over the next several days, the foundations of the placenta begin to take shape. The trophoblast continues to grow and branch, forming structures known as chorionic villi. These finger-like projections extend into the maternal tissue, creating a larger surface area for the exchange of gases and nutrients. Within the villi, small blood vessels from the embryo begin to develop, establishing the earliest form of the circulatory link between mother and child. Though the embryo's own heart has not yet begun to beat, the groundwork for its future circulation is already laid. This growing network will eventually become the placenta, a structure that is at once part of the mother and part of the child, an interface where two systems meet without merging. Implantation also initiates a subtle shift in identity for both organisms. The embryo, once a free and independent traveler, now becomes dependent on its host, relying entirely on the maternal body for sustenance and protection. The mother, in turn, becomes the environment of another being, her body adapting in countless unseen ways to make room for growth. This exchange is mutual and continuous. It is not an invasion, but a partnership, a biological collaboration rooted in cooperation rather than competition. Each side gives and receives in balance, maintaining the harmony necessary for life to flourish. As the implantation process concludes, the embryo enters a phase of relative stability. It is securely embedded, shielded from harm, and supplied with the essentials of development. The uterine lining now envelops it fully, and the outer tissues of the trophoblast continue their transformation into the chorionic membrane, which will one day surround the growing fetus. The embryo itself remains minute, less than a millimeter in length, yet within its structure, the foundation for every future organ is being prepared. Its cells are dividing at a remarkable rate, guided by chemical gradients that determine direction and form. The symmetry of the human body is beginning to emerge, though it will be many weeks before its shape is recognizable. In the stillness of this moment, the first true bond between mother and child has been established. It is a connection not of will, but of nature, formed through molecular whispers and cellular cooperation. Through this connection flows the essence of nourishment, oxygen drawn from the mother's breath, nutrients from her food, warmth from her blood. The embryo, nestled within this quiet sanctuary, begins to grow in rhythm with her heartbeat. Every pulse sends a message of life, each one a gentle reminder of the shared journey now unfolding. As you imagine this scene, picture the embryo resting deep within the soft tissue of the uterus, surrounded by currents of warmth and energy. It is secure, silent, and steady, its needs met through a seamless exchange that requires no effort, no awareness, only the natural harmony of two lives intertwined. Implantation is the beginning of belonging, the moment when the new life ceases to exist alone and begins to thrive within another. It is the first whisper of connection, the origin of nourishment, and the quiet assurance that life, once begun, will continue. 8. The germ layers, foundations of form. Within the secure quiet of the uterus, the embryo continues its intricate dance of division and organization. It has now nestled deeply within the maternal tissue, nourished by the early placenta, surrounded by protective membranes, and sustained by the soft rhythm of the mother's heartbeat. What was once a simple ball of cells is now beginning to transform into something far more complex, a structure with distinct layers, each destined to give rise to the countless tissues and organs of the human body. This process, known as gastrulation, is one of the most elegant and fundamental moments in development. It is here, within these layers, that the foundation of form is laid. Every bone, muscle, nerve, and organ traces its lineage back to these first divisions of purpose. The embryo at this stage is no larger than a grain of sand. Yet within it, a masterpiece of organization is quietly unfolding. The once flat structure of the bilaminar disc, composed of the epiblast and hypoblast, now begins to change. A faint line appears on the surface, the primitive streak marking the embryo's midline and establishing its head-to-tail orientation. This seemingly simple feature is of profound importance, for it gives the embryo its first sense of direction. It is the beginning of symmetry, a sign that the cells are no longer identical, but have begun to take on specialized roles. With the appearance of the primitive streak, gastrulation begins, setting in motion the formation of the 3 primary germ layers that will shape every part of the body. Cells from the epiblast begin to migrate inward through the primitive streak, moving in an organized flow that resembles a gentle current. As they move, they displace the cells of the hypoblast and form new layers beneath the surface. These migrating cells will differentiate into 3 distinct sheets: the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. Together, they form the foundation from which all tissues of the body will arise. Though each layer consists of only a few thousand cells, their future roles are already written in their molecular patterns, as if nature has inscribed a secret map within every one of them. The outermost layer, the ectoderm, will give rise to structures that connect the body to the world around it. From this layer will emerge the skin, the hair, the nails, and most remarkably, the nervous system, the brain, spinal cord, and nerves that will one day interpret light, sound, and touch. It is extraordinary to consider that the delicate tissues of perception, the very instruments of awareness, begin as a thin sheet of cells only micrometers thick. In time, part of this layer will fold inward to form the neural tube, the first structure of the central nervous system. Thus, even in its earliest form, the ectoderm carries within it the promise of consciousness. Beneath the ectoderm lies the mesoderm, the middle layer, responsible for the framework and movement of the body. From this layer, bone and muscle will arise, as well as blood, heart, kidneys, and connective tissues. The mesoderm gives the body its strength and stability, forming the scaffolding upon which all other systems are built. Within it, the primitive heart will soon take shape, its early pulsations beginning to circulate life through the embryo. The mesoderm also forms the notochord, a rod-like structure that serves as a central axis, guiding the development of the spinal column and giving the body its early sense of structure. Even before bones exist, the embryo already holds an invisible backbone of order and orientation. The innermost layer, the endoderm, will form the organs of nourishment and respiration. The lungs, the liver, the pancreas, and the lining of the digestive tract. These organs, which will sustain life long after birth, begin as nothing more than simple sheets of cells, folding inward and forming tubes. The endoderm, though hidden deep within, carries the quiet purpose of sustaining growth from within. It is the layer of inner life, ensuring that the embryo will one day be able to breathe, eat, and renew itself. As these three layers take shape, the embryo undergoes a transformation from simplicity to structure. It is no longer a flat disc, but a curved and folded form, beginning to resemble the first outlines of a body. The head and tail regions become distinct, and the cells begin to specialize according to the invisible instructions carried in their DNA. The process is astonishing in its coordination. Each cell seems to know exactly where to move, when to divide, and what it must become. There is no leader directing them, no central command. Only the harmony of molecular signals, guiding millions of small decisions toward a unified goal. The development of the germ layers also marks the establishment of the body's first axes: front and back, left and right, top and bottom. These directions are not arbitrary but carefully defined by gradients of signaling molecules diffusing through the embryo. Depending on their position, cells are exposed to different concentrations of these chemical cues, which determine their fate. It is through this subtle orchestration that complexity arises from uniformity. The same genetic material exists in every cell. Yet through these gradients, each one receives a unique message about its role in the larger design. As the germ layers continue to evolve, they begin to communicate with one another in intricate ways. Signals from the mesoderm influence the formation of the nervous system in the ectoderm, while the endoderm provides cues that help shape the heart and gut. This crosstalk between layers ensures that the developing systems remain synchronized. The embryo is not merely a collection of parts forming independently, but a community of cells working together with astonishing precision. It is an early reflection of the interconnectedness that will define the living organism throughout its life, every system supporting and responding to the others in seamless cooperation. During this stage, the embryo is also forming its first protective and nourishing structures. The amniotic cavity, filled with clear fluid, envelops the embryo, cushioning it against movement and temperature changes. The yolk sac, derived from the endoderm, continues to supply early nutrients, while the developing placenta strengthens its hold within the uterine lining. These supporting systems are essential, maintaining a delicate balance of stability and change. They provide the environment in which the germ layers can continue their quiet labor of creation. From the outside, these events remain completely invisible, yet within, the embryo is now a landscape of potential. Every contour, every layer, carries a hint of the form it will one day become. The thin ectoderm will fold and twist into the complexity of the nervous system. The mesoderm will sculpt bones and muscles, and the endoderm will hollow into organs that will nourish and cleanse. It is a slow and patient unfolding, a kind of biological origami in which each fold adds depth and dimension. The wonder of the germ layers lies not only in their function, but in their elegance. They are the foundation of all biological architecture, the silent framework upon which life constructs its intricate designs. When we trace the origin of any part of the body, a heartbeat, a breath, a thought, it leads back to this moment of layering and differentiation. It is the point where the potential of the zygote begins to manifest as physical reality. As you imagine this stage, picture the embryo as a small, translucent form suspended within a world of fluid light. Within it, 3 delicate layers ripple and move, each one alive with purpose. Though there is no sound, no movement perceptible to the eye, every cell is at work, building, shaping, and connecting. In this quiet construction lies the essence of growth itself, patient, precise, and beautifully ordered. The formation of the germ layers marks the beginning of structure, the first whisper of identity taking shape from formlessness. It is the foundation upon which all future complexity will rest. From these layers will rise the heart that beats, the lungs that breathe, the brain that dreams. In their harmony, we find the earliest expression of life's enduring truth, that every living being, no matter how complex, begins with the simplest of forms, guided by the gentle hand of order written deep within the fabric of existence. 9. The blueprint of the body. In the quiet sanctuary of the womb, the embryo continues to grow, no longer a simple cluster of cells, but an intricate structure of organized layers. Each layer, ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm, now begins to interact in complex ways, exchanging signals that determine what each part will become. This is the moment when the body's plan begins to reveal itself. When the unseen design, hidden in the embryo's DNA, starts to take physical form, it is as though nature unfolds a detailed map, guiding every cell to its rightful place. Though the embryo is still smaller than a grain of rice, its destiny is already written, the blueprint of the human form quietly coming to life within the soft boundaries of the womb. The embryo's transformation from simplicity to recognizable structure is one of the most elegant sequences in biology. What was once a flat disk of cells begins to fold and curve, turning inward on itself. The edges rise, meeting at the top, forming a cylindrical shape that encloses the developing organs. This folding process gives the embryo its three-dimensional form, transforming it from a sheet into a living architecture. As it folds, the cells along the midline of the ectoderm begin to thicken, creating a raised ridge known as the neural plate. This plate bends inward, forming a groove that will later close to become the neural tube, the earliest structure of the central nervous system. Within a matter of days, this tube will stretch from one end of the embryo to the other, the future pathway of the brain and spinal cord. Beneath the neural tube, the mesoderm begins to organize into repeating segments called somites. These are the building blocks of the body's structure, each one destined to form muscles, bones, and connective tissue. Like a series of rhythmic beats, the somites appear in pairs along the embryo's length, creating a faint pattern that mirrors the segmented symmetry of the human form. This segmentation will later define the vertebrae of the spine, the ribs, and the arrangement of muscles along the back and limbs. Within this quiet order, one can already sense the rhythm of life, a repetition of form that will become the pulse of motion and balance. The endoderm, meanwhile, begins to fold inward, creating the primitive gut. This simple tube, running the length of the embryo, will become the digestive system, mouth, esophagus, stomach, intestines, and associated glands. Though it appears humble in its beginnings, it will one day sustain life through nourishment, linking the outer world of food to the inner world of energy and growth. The coordination of these developing structures is astonishing. Each fold and curve occurs at precisely the right time, each layer knowing where to move, where to settle, and what to become. As the embryo folds, the concept of body plan emerges. Head, tail, front, and back become distinct regions. The top portion expands, forming the early brain, while the lower end tapers into the beginnings of the spinal column. The heart, which began as a simple tube in the mesoderm, now curves and loops upon itself, preparing for the rhythmic contractions that will soon begin. Tiny blood vessels branch outward from it, connecting to the yolk sac and the developing placenta, creating the embryo's first circulatory system. These vessels will carry oxygen and nutrients from the mother's blood, establishing a life-sustaining exchange that will continue until birth. This early period of pattern formation, called morphogenesis, is guided by a remarkable orchestration of molecular signals. Within each cell, genes are turned on or off in response to these signals, determining whether that cell will become part of the skin, the heart, or the nervous system. These genetic instructions act like a conductor leading an unseen orchestra, ensuring that every note is played at the right moment. Some genes are ancient, shared by creatures across the animal kingdom, silent witnesses to the continuity of life through time. In the embryo's growth, one can glimpse echoes of the patterns that shaped the first multicellular organisms hundreds of millions of years ago. Even as these intricate systems emerge, the embryo remains deeply protected, suspended in amniotic fluid that cushions it from any external pressure. The amnion, a thin yet resilient membrane, creates a sealed chamber filled with clear fluid that allows the embryo to float freely. This environment ensures that each delicate fold can occur without resistance, preserving the precision of form. Around it, the chorion and early placenta continue to expand, deepening their roots into the uterine wall. Tiny villi branch outward into the maternal tissue, connecting the two circulations, maternal and embryonic, while keeping their blood supplies separate. The exchange between mother and child grows more sophisticated, an invisible partnership that sustains the fragile construction of new life. Inside the embryo, the earliest traces of organ systems are now apparent. The neural tube thickens at one end, forming three bulges that will become the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Beneath it, the heart begins to contract faintly, pushing blood through a primitive network of vessels. These first beats are irregular and faint, yet they mark a turning point, the transition from cellular life to organismal life. The embryo now has movement, not yet conscious or purposeful, but a rhythm of vitality that will continue unbroken for the rest of its existence. Alongside these developments, the beginnings of limbs can be faintly seen. Small buds appear on either side of the embryo's body, the first signs of arms and legs. They are little more than protrusions at this stage, but within them lies the precise plan of bones, joints, and muscles. As the weeks progress, these buds will lengthen, divide, and sculpt themselves into recognizable limbs, capable of movement and touch. Even now, the positioning of these buds is carefully aligned, dictated by gradients of signaling molecules that ensure perfect symmetry. It is this symmetry that gives the human body its balance, its graceful proportion, and its sense of harmony. Every stage of this process reflects the underlying logic of nature, simplicity leading to complexity through quiet repetition. There is no wasted motion, no unnecessary gesture. Each cell performs its task as if guided by memory, though it has no awareness. The embryo grows according to the instructions encoded in its DNA, a script that has been refined through eons of evolution. This script ensures that the same patterns unfold with remarkable consistency across every generation. The same heart takes shape, the same bones align, the same features emerge, linking all humans in a shared design written long before any of us existed. As the body plan becomes more defined, the embryo takes on a gentle curve, its head and tail bending toward one another. The outer surface begins to smooth, the inner organs to find their places. The neural tube closes fully, protecting the developing brain and spinal cord. The somites, now numbering more than 20, form the backbone of the body's structure, giving rise to muscle and bone. Every moment, millions of cellular decisions are being made, each one contributing to the overall harmony. Yet through all this activity, the process remains silent and serene, unfolding in darkness, unhurried and exact. If one could see the embryo at this moment, it would appear both familiar and mysterious, a being halfway between potential and form. The curve of the head, the rhythm of the heart, the symmetry of its tiny body all hint at what it will become. Yet much still lies ahead. The organs are only beginning to take shape. The senses have not yet awakened. The blueprint is complete, but the construction has only just begun. What remains is the gradual refinement of this design, the slow deepening of complexity that will carry the embryo toward recognition as a human form. To contemplate the blueprint of the body is to glimpse the intelligence of life itself, an intelligence that operates without consciousness, guided by balance, pattern, and time. The embryo follows no external instruction, yet every fold, every signal, occurs in perfect order. It is a quiet demonstration of how life builds itself from within, how complexity arises from simplicity, and how the smallest beginnings can give rise to the greatest wonders. As you picture this stage, imagine the embryo suspended in gentle motion, its form curving and folding like a living sculpture. Each layer is alive with purpose, each cell contributing to the whole. There is no noise, no urgency, only the calm unfolding of design. The blueprint of the body, invisible yet absolute, continues to guide its creation. It is a process as old as time and as enduring as the heartbeat that has just begun to echo within it. Steady, rhythmic, eternal, tend the neural tube and the dawn of the brain. Deep within the embryo, a new and wondrous transformation is beginning. The foundation of the human nervous system, the most intricate and delicate network in all of biology, is quietly taking shape. What began as a simple layer of ectodermal cells has now begun to fold and curve inward, creating a structure that will one day become the brain, the spinal cord, and the vast web of nerves that carry every sensation, every thought, every impulse of life. This is the formation of the neural tube, a process so subtle that it unfolds in complete silence, yet so profound that it marks the dawn of awareness itself. It is within this slender tube that the capacity for perception, movement, memory, and emotion will one day arise. At this stage, the embryo is still very small, barely a few millimeters in length, and yet the complexity emerging within it is immense. The outermost layer of cells, the ectoderm, has begun to thicken along the midline, forming a narrow ridge known as the neural plate. This plate runs the length of the embryo, like a faint stripe of light, delineating where the nervous system will form. As the days pass, the edges of the neural plate lift and curve toward each other, creating a shallow groove in the center, the neural groove. Slowly, the edges continue to rise and fold inward, drawing closer until they meet and fuse, forming a closed cylinder. This is the neural tube, the embryo's first true organ, and the earliest manifestation of what will become the central nervous system. The process of neural tube formation, called neurulation, is one of the most elegant acts of biological coordination. It requires precise timing and communication between thousands of cells, each responding to gradients of chemical signals that dictate their behavior. Certain molecules encourage cells to move, others to flatten or thicken, and still others to fuse at just the right moment. The closure of the neural tube does not occur all at once. It begins near the center of the embryo and proceeds in both directions, toward the head and the tail. This gradual sealing ensures that the entire length of the future nervous system is formed seamlessly, a continuous passage through which signals will one day flow like electricity through a living wire. As the neural tube forms, its shape begins to change. The portion near the head end expands and bulges outward, creating three distinct swellings: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. These regions represent the earliest divisions of what will become the human brain. Each swelling holds the potential for astonishing complexity. The forebrain will develop into the cerebral hemispheres, the seat of thought, emotion, and consciousness. The midbrain will regulate movement and sensory integration, and the hindbrain will control vital functions such as breathing and balance. At this moment, they exist only as hollow cavities, within a translucent tube. Their destiny is already defined by the silent patterns unfolding within. The rest of the neural tube, extending downward along the embryo's length, will become the spinal cord. Within it, tiny cells begin to organize into specific zones, regions, for sensory input, motor control, and reflexes. Around the central canal, neuroepithelial cells multiply rapidly, forming the first generation of neural stem cells. These cells will give rise to every neuron and glial cell in the nervous system, creating billions of connections that will one day allow the brain to interpret the world. The structure of the neural tube provides a blueprint for this organization, dividing the nervous system into ordered segments that ensure coordination between brain and body. As this process continues, another remarkable transformation occurs. Along the edges of the closing neural tube, a special group of cells separates and migrates throughout the embryo. These are the neural crest cells, often described as the wanderers of embryology. They will travel far from their origin to form an astonishing variety of structures: the peripheral nerves, the pigment cells of the skin, parts of the skull and face, and even portions of the heart. Their journey is guided by chemical signals that tell them where to go and when to stop, allowing them to populate every region of the developing body. Though they begin as part of the nervous system, their contributions extend well beyond it, shaping the very features that make each face unique. Inside the neural tube, the cells lining its walls continue to divide rapidly. Some remain as stem cells, maintaining the capacity for future growth, while others begin to differentiate into neurons. These early neurons extend long projections, called axons, that will connect distant parts of the embryo, forming the first primitive circuits. For now, these circuits do not yet carry sensation or thought, but they are the beginnings of a system that will one day interpret every sound, every touch, every memory. It is humbling to imagine that all the complexity of the human mind, every dream, every emotion begins here, within this hollow tube only fractions of a millimeter wide. The development of the neural tube also brings the first faint stirrings of coordination, as the cells within it begin to communicate through electrical impulses. Patterns of activity flicker through the tissue. These early signals are not yet conscious, but they mark the embryo's first experience of rhythm, the beginning of internal communication. Soon, as the heart begins to beat, the nervous system will synchronize with it, establishing the physiological harmony that will sustain life from this point onward. In these tiny electrical sparks, one can sense the earliest whispers of awareness, the first hints of the nervous system's future purpose: to perceive, to connect, to know. Around the neural tube, the mesoderm continues its own quiet work. The somites that formed earlier begin to differentiate further, giving rise to the vertebrae that will one day protect the spinal cord. Layers of muscle and connective tissue begin to form, wrapping around the tube like a shield. The embryo, once fragile and exposed, is now becoming an integrated structure, form and function, intertwined in perfect balance. Even the skin, derived from the outer ectoderm, thickens around the neural folds, providing additional protection. Every element works in harmony, building a safe vessel for the developing nervous system that will soon govern the entire body. While the embryo's physical form is still small, the potential contained within it is vast beyond comprehension. The neural tube is the foundation of thought, the biological bridge between body and mind. It will give rise to billions of neurons, each capable of forming thousands of connections. These connections, once established, will carry the signals that make movement possible, that interpret light and sound, that give rise to imagination and language. From this simple tube will emerge the capacity to love, to create, to understand. All the complexity of human consciousness, all the depth of emotion and reason, begins here in these first few weeks of life, long before birth. As the neural tube continues to mature, its outer layers thicken, while the inner space narrows into a central canal filled with cerebrospinal fluid. This fluid cushions the delicate tissue, maintaining its shape and providing a stable environment for growth. At the same time, blood vessels begin to form around the developing brain, delivering oxygen and nutrients essential for the rapid pace of cell division. The embryo, though still tiny, is now a place of intense activity, every moment filled with creation, every cell contributing to the silent building of complexity. To picture this moment is to glimpse the threshold between the physical and the intangible. Within the embryo, there is no awareness yet, no sense of self, yet the machinery for both is coming into being. The neural tube, with its expanding brain regions and lengthening spinal cord, is the first structure to suggest the possibility of consciousness. It is as though nature, through eons of refinement, has found a way to fold thought into matter, to give physical form to the invisible patterns that one day will perceive and wonder. Imagine the embryo now, suspended in its amniotic world, lightless and serene. Within its translucent body, the neural tube glows faintly with potential, curving along its axis like a slender thread of light. Around it, the heart begins to pulse. The blood vessels trace their first delicate paths, and the entire being hums with quiet purpose. The dawn of the brain is not a sudden event, but a gradual illumination, the awakening of structure, the preparation for thought. In the stillness of the womb, the embryo is becoming something more than living matter. It is becoming aware matter, capable of perceiving the world that awaits beyond. In the story of embryology, the formation of the neural tube is both a scientific and poetic moment, the bridge between life as growth and life as experience. From this small, silent beginning will emerge the mind itself, the organ that will think, feel, and dream. It is the dawn not only of the brain, but of the capacity to imagine the universe that created it. And in that unfolding, the quiet miracle of existence continues steady, patient, and infinitely profound. 11. The heart's first beat. In the deep stillness of the womb, where all is dark and sheltered, a quiet rhythm begins to stir. It is faint at first, a subtle pulsing, hidden within the tiny body of the embryo. This is the moment when motion returns to silence, when life begins to echo its presence through rhythm, the first heartbeat. Long before the senses awaken, before thought or awareness, there is movement. It is the earliest song of existence, a biological rhythm that will continue unbroken for the rest of life. The heart, small and unformed, begins its steady work, sending nourishment and vitality through the developing body. Its beat is both mechanical and sacred, a mark of life and a reminder of the continuity of all living things. The creation of the heart is one of nature's most remarkable feats. It begins not as a finished organ, but as a simple tube, fashioned from cells that emerge from the mesoderm, the middle germ layer that also gives rise to muscles and blood vessels. This primitive heart tube is formed only a few weeks after fertilization, when the embryo measures little more than a few millimeters in length. At first, it is straight, lying along the midline of the body, but it soon begins to fold and loop, curling into a shape that hints at its future complexity. This looping transforms the simple tube into a structure with distinct chambers and curves, ensuring that blood will one day flow efficiently through its pathways. Within this early heart tube, two streams of fluid begin to move. They are not yet true blood, for the embryo's red blood cells are still forming, but plasma and simple nutrients flow in their place. The contractions that move this fluid are spontaneous, generated by specialized cells that possess the innate ability to depolarize and contract in rhythm. These are the earliest pacemaker cells, tiny biological conductors, setting the tempo for life's first song. Their coordinated movement causes the entire tube to pulsate, driving the fluid forward in a wave-like motion. Though weak at first, these pulses soon establish a steady rhythm, one that will gradually strengthen as the embryo grows. This first beat is not simply a mechanical action. It marks a profound transition. Until now, the embryo has been sustained entirely by diffusion, with nutrients and oxygen moving passively from mother to child. But as the body grows more complex, diffusion alone is no longer enough. The development of a circulatory system, a means of moving substances throughout the body, becomes essential. The heart's formation represents this evolutionary leap, ensuring that every part of the growing organism will receive the nourishment it needs. It is the moment when self-sufficiency begins, when the embryo becomes an active participant in its own survival. The development of blood vessels occurs alongside the heart's early motion. Within the mesoderm, clusters of cells known as blood islands begin to form. These islands produce both the first blood cells and the endothelial lining that will make up the walls of the vessels. Gradually, these clusters connect, forming a network of channels that spread through the embryo like the delicate roots of a growing tree. The heart, positioned at the center of this network, becomes the engine that drives circulation through these vessels. With each contraction, fluid moves outward from the heart and returns again, establishing the first true circulation of life. This closed loop of movement marks a turning point in development, a system now capable of supporting rapid growth and complexity. As the embryo continues to mature, the heart's structure becomes more defined. The single tube begins to divide into chambers, first 2, then 4. Septa, or dividing walls, form between the right and left sides, creating separate pathways for oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood. Valves emerge at key points, ensuring that the flow moves in only one direction. These valves open and close with precision, their delicate flaps responding perfectly to pressure changes within the chambers. In time, the heart's pattern of contraction becomes synchronized. The atria contract first, followed by the ventricles, producing the rhythmic sound that one day will be heard through a stethoscope, the steady thrum of life. The early circulatory system does not yet function as it will after birth, for the embryo's lungs are still undeveloped. Instead, oxygen and nutrients come entirely from the mother's blood, transferred through the placenta. Special vessels, such as the umbilical vein and arteries, form the connection between the two circulatory systems. Through the umbilical vein, oxygenated blood flows from the placenta to the embryo, and through the umbilical arteries, waste and carbon dioxide return to the mother. The fetal heart is designed to accommodate this unique pattern of flow, with small openings between its chambers that will close only after birth. These adaptations ensure that, even in its earliest stages, the embryo receives exactly what it needs to grow. The rhythmic contraction of the heart soon becomes a constant presence, sending waves of energy through the surrounding tissues. The pulse of blood begins to shape the growth of vessels, influencing their size and direction. In a sense, the heart does more than circulate life. It organizes it. Its rhythm sets the pace for development, coordinating with the forming nervous system and the early muscles that are beginning to take shape. This alignment of motion and form is essential, for the embryo's growth depends on harmony between its systems. The nervous system will soon send signals that refine the heartbeat, but for now, the rhythm comes entirely from within the heart itself, an autonomous expression of life. As the embryo grows, the heart's appearance changes dramatically. What was once a straight tube has now taken on the familiar curved shape that defines the organ in all vertebrates. The upper portion, or atria, expands, while the lower portion thicken with muscular walls capable of strong contractions. The heart now beats with enough force to push blood throughout the entire embryo, feeding the developing organs and delivering oxygen to the rapidly dividing cells. If one could see it under magnification, the heart would appear as a tiny, translucent jewel, shimmering with motion. Its contractions would be rhythmic and sure, each one a soft reminder of the continuity of life. The first heartbeat is often described as a milestone, but in truth, it is more like a whisper, the quiet declaration that life has begun to move in harmony with time. Long before birth, before breath, before thought, the rhythm of the heart keeps time with the flow of existence. Every living creature shares in this rhythm, each beat a link in the endless chain of life's renewal. The heart does not ask why it beats, nor does it rest in uncertainty. It simply continues, its motion a natural expression of being. The emotional significance of the first heartbeat is not limited to biology. Across cultures and generations, the sound of a heartbeat has come to symbolize presence, connection, and love. It is the first sound that a mother senses, a faint flutter within her body that signals the existence of another life. That gentle pulse becomes a reassurance, a steady reminder that something small and precious is growing in the darkness. From that moment, two rhythms become intertwined, the mother's and the child's pulsing together in quiet synchronization. As you imagine this moment, think of the embryo, nestled deep within the warmth of the womb. The heart, no larger than a grain of rice, beats steadily within its translucent chest. Each pulse sends waves of nourishment through the tiny body, carrying life into every corner of its forming frame. Around it, the world remains silent and still, but within, there is movement, rhythm, and the quiet persistence of being. The heart's first beat is both the continuation of ancient rhythms and the beginning of a new one, a singular pulse in the vast continuum of existence. It is a simple motion, and yet it defines all that will follow. Every emotion, every breath, every moment of life will echo this first rhythm. The heart's steady work will accompany the body through every change, every joy and sorrow, every quiet night and bright morning. It begins now, in the soft shadows of the womb, and will continue until the very end. The first heartbeat is not only the beginning of circulation, it is the beginning of time for that individual life. It is the first sign that the body has found its rhythm, and that within the silence, life is moving forward. 12. The shaping of the limbs and face. As the embryo continues to grow, the patterns of its form become increasingly complex, unfolding in quiet precision within the protective world of the womb. The foundations of the body have already been laid. The heart now beats in rhythmic certainty. The neural tube is sealed, and the germ layers have taken their places, each devoted to a specific destiny. Now, under the guidance of invisible instructions written in its genetic code, the embryo begins to sculpt itself into a recognizable human form. The changes are both subtle and extraordinary, marking the beginning of external structure, the emergence of limbs, the outline of the face, and the first hints of identity. What was once a cluster of cells has become a small but living architecture, and within its delicate curves, the human shape slowly begins to reveal itself. At around 5 to 6 weeks after fertilization, the embryo measures only a few millimeters in length, yet it is already proportioned with remarkable accuracy. The head region grows faster than the rest, swelling outward as the brain develops within. Beneath the surface, the neural tube expands, forming the early chambers of the brain. The curvature of the body deepens, causing the embryo to curl gently upon itself like a leaf folding inward. It floats in the amniotic fluid, its movements too small to be felt but already purposeful, guided by the steady rhythm of its heart and the quiet coordination of its forming muscles. The first signs of the limbs appear as small buds on either side of the body, delicate protrusions of tissue extending from the mesoderm beneath the surface. These buds are the beginnings of the arms and legs. At first, they are identical, short stumps that give no clue to their future distinction. But as days pass, the upper pair lengthens and flattens at the ends, forming the shape of tiny paddles. Within these structures, a precise choreography of cell division and death begins. Cells in certain regions grow rapidly, while others are programmed to dissolve, carving spaces that will become the separations between fingers. This process, known as apoptosis, is one of nature's quiet acts of sculpting the removal of the unnecessary to reveal form and function. As the limb buds continue to grow, internal frameworks of cartilage begin to appear. These will serve as the early models of bones, which will later harden through a process called ossification. The upper limb, destined to become the arm, elbow, and hand, develops slightly ahead of the lower limb, which will form the leg, knee, and foot. Each joint, muscle, and tendon begins to take shape in harmony, guided by genetic signals that ensure the correct proportion and orientation. The process is so precise that even a slight deviation in timing or molecular instruction could alter the final form. Yet in nearly every case, it unfolds perfectly. It is as if the embryo carries within it an ancient memory of structure, recalling through evolution how to build the human body anew with each generation. While the limbs are forming, the face begins its own gentle emergence. The head, once smooth and round, now shows distinct features. Small swellings appear where the eyes will form, flanking a central prominence that will become the forehead and nose. The eyes themselves begin as small pits, invaginations of the ectoderm that deepen to form the optic cups. Within these cups, the first primitive light-sensitive cells appear, the earliest beginnings of sight. Though the embryo will not see light for many months, the structures of vision are already assembling in quiet preparation for that future moment. Below the eyes, small folds of tissue grow toward the center, gradually merging to form the upper lip and the beginnings of the nose. The process is delicate and timed to perfection. If the folds fail to meet, conditions such as cleft lip can result. Yet in most embryos, the fusion occurs seamlessly, uniting the face into a balanced and symmetrical whole. Beneath this surface, the bones of the jaw begin to form, derived from the migrating neural crest cells that once traveled from the edges of the neural tube. These cells, remarkable in their versatility, will also contribute to the formation of the skull, the teeth, and the connective tissues of the face. The ears, too, begin their quiet construction during this stage. Tiny depressions form on either side of the head, soon surrounded by raised ridges that will shape themselves into the external ear. Deep within, the structures of the inner ear are already forming from the ectoderm, the cochlea, which will one day translate vibrations into sound, and the semicircular canals, which will allow balance and orientation. It is a poetic irony that these organs of perception form in complete silence, sculpted in a world without sound, preparing for a sensory experience that will only come after birth. As the face and limbs continue to refine, the embryo's overall proportions shift. The head, once disproportionately large, now begins to balance with the trunk. The heart's chambers grow more defined, and the blood vessels extend farther into the developing limbs, supplying them with the oxygen and nutrients necessary for growth. The skin, still translucent, reveals a faint map of vessels beneath, pulsing with life. Within the limbs, the early muscles begin to contract, producing small, spontaneous movements. These motions are not yet coordinated, but they signal that the connection between nerves and muscles is taking hold. The embryo is beginning to move of its own accord, a sign of vitality and integration. Meanwhile, inside the developing face, the beginnings of the mouth and throat form intricate networks of passageways. The pharyngeal arches, small bands of tissue in the neck region, give rise to the jaw, throat, and parts of the ear. Within them, arteries, nerves, and muscles are precisely arranged, each arch contributing to specific structures that will later enable speech, swallowing, and expression. Though the embryo's face remains small and undefined, its internal complexity is immense. Every smile, every word spoken in the future, will depend on these early formations occurring now in quiet perfection. The precision of this process is breathtaking. Each fold, each curve, follows a pattern dictated by both genetics and environment. The signals that drive facial and limb development are universal among humans, yet they allow for subtle variation, differences in shape, proportion, and contour that will later define individuality. In this way, the embryo's growth reflects both the unity and diversity of life. Every human face follows the same plan, yet each emerges distinct, carrying its own quiet story, written in symmetry and variation. By the end of the 8th week of development, the embryo has transformed dramatically. The arms and legs extend outward, the hands and feet show distinct fingers and toes, and the face, though small, is unmistakably human. The eyelids have begun to form, covering the developing eyes, and the ears have risen to their familiar positions along the head. The embryo's tail, a remnant of its evolutionary ancestry, has almost disappeared, absorbed into the structure of the spinal column. Within, the organs continue to refine, the liver, stomach, and intestines taking their proper positions, while the heart beats strongly, sending life to every corner of the body. The shaping of the limbs and face marks a transition from an abstract pattern of tissues to a form that bears the recognizable imprint of humanity. Yet it remains a stage of deep vulnerability, a period when growth and change are at their most delicate. The embryo floats, protected within its amniotic world, surrounded by a steady warmth and the quiet murmur of the maternal body. It is a time of sculpting, of gradual emergence, when the unseen artistry of nature gives rise to symmetry, proportion, and expression. If one could look upon the embryo now, suspended in its liquid sanctuary, it would seem both familiar and strange. A miniature human being, eyes closed, limbs curved inward, face serene. It does not yet know movement as willful action, nor sensation as awareness. But within it, the potential for both is forming. The hands that will one day reach for the world are taking shape, and the face that will one day smile is beginning to appear. In the silence of the womb, this transformation continues unhurried, guided by an intelligence older than time itself, the wisdom of life constructing itself again, piece by piece, in perfect calm. 13. The development of organs. Within the tranquil darkness of the womb, the embryo continues to grow with measured grace. Its limbs now reach outward, its face has begun to take shape, and deep inside, the foundation of every organ is quietly being refined. This stage marks a profound turning point in development, a transition from formation to function, from structure to activity. What were once indistinct clusters of cells now begin to specialize into the organs that will sustain life, the heart that will beat for decades, the lungs that will one day breathe air, the liver that will cleanse, and the brain that will think, remember, and dream. It is a symphony of transformation, each note precise and necessary, played out in the silence of the maternal world. By the time the embryo reaches the end of its 2nd month, it measures less than an inch in length, yet its complexity surpasses imagination. The process of organogenesis, the making of organs, is now in full motion. Every organ system is represented, though still in miniature, and each develops at its own pace, following a sequence that has been repeated across countless generations. The heart, which began beating in earlier weeks, now divides into chambers, strengthening its muscular walls. The rhythmic contractions that once pushed simple plasma now move true blood through a network of vessels that reaches into every forming tissue. The embryo's circulation, though still connected to the placenta, is now largely self-regulating, demonstrating the first traces of physiological independence. The brain, expanding at an astonishing rate, dominates the growing head. Its earlier divisions, forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain, now begin to form recognizable structures. The forebrain expands into the cerebral hemispheres, which will later control thought, emotion, and language. The midbrain organizes pathways for sight and hearing, while the hindbrain gives rise to the medulla and cerebellum, the centers of balance and coordination. Though the embryo's nervous system is not yet conscious, electrical activity flickers through the neural tissue in rhythmic patterns, like distant lightning in a quiet sky. These early pulses will soon begin to coordinate with the developing muscles, laying the groundwork for the first spontaneous movements. Beneath the growing brain, the face continues to refine. The mouth opens, though the embryo cannot yet swallow. The tongue appears, and small buds emerge within the mouth that will later form the teeth. The eyes, still closed by delicate folds of skin, contain the developing retina and lens. These structures will remain inactive until months later, when light first reaches them through the eyelids. The ears deepen internally, connecting their chambers to the brain through tiny nerves that will one day translate vibration into sound. The sense organs are being sculpted patiently, waiting for the time when they can awaken to the outer world. In the chest, the lungs begin their delicate architecture. They start as small buds branching from the upper part of the digestive tube, dividing and subdividing into finer and finer passages. Though they will not breathe air until birth, their formation is crucial, even now. The lungs prepare themselves by secreting small amounts of fluid that help shape their internal spaces, and blood vessels begin to weave through their growing tissue. The diaphragm, a thin muscular sheet that will one day drive each breath, also begins to form, separating the chest from the abdomen and giving shape to the body's internal chambers. The liver, one of the earliest and largest organs to appear, takes on a deep reddish hue as it fills the upper abdomen. In these early weeks, it plays a vital role in producing blood cells, a task that will later shift to the bone marrow. The liver's other functions, detoxifying the body and producing bile, will develop gradually, preparing it to sustain the newborn after birth. Nearby, the pancreas and gallbladder take their places, forming delicate ducts that connect to the digestive tract. Each tube and passage is carved with precision, ensuring that in time, food and fluid will flow effortlessly through the body's inner pathways. Below the liver, the stomach and intestines continue to elongate and fold into their proper configuration. For a brief period, part of the intestine even extends outside the abdominal cavity, looping into the umbilical cord before retracting again as the abdomen grows. This temporary arrangement allows space for the digestive organs to mature without constraint. By the end of this stage, the intestines have returned inside, coiling neatly into their permanent shape. Within their walls, smooth muscles begin to develop, preparing for the rhythmic contractions that will one day move food through the digestive system. The kidneys, forming toward the back of the embryo, begin their early function as well. They filter small amounts of fluid from the blood, returning essential nutrients and excreting waste into the amniotic cavity. This primitive urine, though minimal, contributes to the volume of amniotic fluid that surrounds the embryo. The bladder begins to take form, along with the ureters that will connect it to the kidneys. Though these organs will not reach full function until after birth, their presence marks the embryo's growing capacity for self-regulation, the ability to balance intake and output, nourishment and purification. The reproductive organs, too, begin their silent development. At this point, they appear identical in all embryos, for sexual differentiation has not yet occurred. Both sets of potential structures exist side by side, awaiting the hormonal signals that will later determine whether they develop into testes or ovaries. This neutral stage is a reflection of nature's efficiency, a universal pattern that diverges only when the time is right. It is a reminder that the earliest forms of life hold within them every possibility, shaped only later by specific paths of growth. Within the embryo's skeleton, a transformation is also underway. The cartilage that once provided soft structure begins to harden in certain regions, forming the first centers of bone. The process of ossification begins in the limbs, the ribs, and the spine, replacing pliable tissue with the durability needed for movement and support. The skull remains largely cartilaginous, allowing flexibility as the brain continues to expand. Surrounding the growing skeleton, the muscles thicken and strengthen. Each tiny contraction refines the connection between nerve and muscle, building coordination through repetition. These first movements are involuntary, yet they are essential, stimulating growth and preventing stiffness in the forming joints. The placenta, that intricate interface between mother and child, continues to evolve in tandem with these developments. Its network of blood vessels becomes more complex, allowing more efficient exchange of gases and nutrients. Through the umbilical cord, oxygen and nourishment pass from mother to embryo, while carbon dioxide and waste products return. This quiet partnership ensures that the embryo can devote its energy entirely to growth. The placenta also serves as a protective barrier, filtering out many harmful substances and producing hormones that sustain the pregnancy. Its presence is constant and essential, the unseen bridge that allows one life to sustain another. By the end of this stage, the embryo is on the verge of a new identity. It will soon be called a fetus, marking the completion of its basic structures. Though it remains small and fragile, its organs are now all present in miniature form. Each one will continue to grow and refine, preparing for the independent life that lies ahead. The body's systems, once scattered and disorganized, now function in concert, united by the rhythm of the heart and the guidance of the nervous system. In the darkness of the womb, all of this occurs without pause. The embryo, though unseen, is a world in motion, cells dividing, tissues folding, organs expanding in silent cooperation. There is no noise, no light, only the soft cadence of growth. Every system is both unique and interconnected, each relying on the others in perfect balance. Within this harmony, the human form approaches completion, embodying the deep intelligence of nature itself. If one could look upon the embryo now, it would seem impossibly small to contain so much complexity. And yet, within it, the blueprint of a living being has come fully to life. The organs, once indistinguishable, now hum with quiet purpose. The heart beats, the blood flows, the lungs branch, the brain expands, and the body moves in gentle rhythms. In this serene orchestration, life continues its timeless work, transforming simplicity into complexity, potential into presence. The development of organs is not merely the building of parts, but the awakening of function, the transition from form to life in motion. It is the moment when the human story, written in the silent language of cells, begins to express itself in the music of existence. 14. The placenta and umbilical symphony. In the deep quiet of the womb, the embryo has now reached a remarkable stage of harmony. Its organs are formed, its limbs are shaped, and its heart beats with steady rhythm. Yet even as these internal systems come alive, the embryo remains entirely dependent on a single, extraordinary structure, the placenta. This organ, unlike any other, serves as the vital link between mother and child, a living bridge that carries nourishment, oxygen, and warmth across the divide that separates two beings yet binds them together. Through the placenta and its companion, the umbilical cord, a silent symphony of exchange takes place, sustaining life in perfect balance. It is a partnership so seamless, so intimate, that the embryo's every heartbeat is intertwined with that of the mother, their two circulations flowing in quiet duet. The placenta begins its life as part of the same structure that gave rise to the embryo itself. In the earliest days after implantation, the outer layer of the blastocyst, the trophoblast, invaded the uterine lining, anchoring the embryo to the maternal body. From that moment forward, it began to transform, growing deeper into the endometrium and establishing channels through which the mother's blood could flow. These channels, filled with oxygen and nutrients, soon became the foundation for the placenta, an organ built not by one body alone, but by two working in concert. As the weeks passed, the trophoblast expanded into delicate branches, called chorionic villi, which extended into the maternal tissue like the roots of a tree. Within these villi, tiny fetal blood vessels formed, separated from the mother's blood by only the thinnest membrane. Across this surface, the first exchanges of life began: oxygen flowing in, carbon dioxide flowing out, nourishment passing one way, waste the other. The placenta is, in essence, the embryo's external organ, performing all the functions that the unborn child cannot yet accomplish alone. It acts as the lungs, bringing oxygen from the mother's bloodstream, as the intestines, delivering nutrients and energy, and as the kidneys. It also produces essential hormones that regulate pregnancy, ensuring that the uterine lining remains stable and that the mother's body continues to support the growing life within. Among these hormones is progesterone, which maintains the uterine environment, and estrogen, which promotes blood flow and tissue growth. Another, human chorionic gonadotropin, the first signal of pregnancy, continues to play its role, supporting the corpus luteum and preserving the delicate balance of hormones that sustain gestation. Each of these chemical messengers works in harmony, maintaining the symphony that keeps both mother and child in rhythm. The physical connection between the placenta and the embryo is maintained through the umbilical cord, a supple, spiraling structure that extends from the child's abdomen to the center of the placenta. Within the cord run 3 vessels, 2 arteries, and 1 vein wrapped in a gelatinous substance known as Wharton's jelly, which cushions them against pressure and movement. The umbilical vein carries oxygen-rich blood and nutrients from the placenta to the embryo, while the umbilical arteries return deoxygenated blood and waste products back to the placenta. It is a constant flow, continuous and silent, like the slow current of a river moving through a fertile valley. Though their blood never directly mixes, the exchange between mother and child is seamless, sustained through diffusion across the thin membranes of the placental barrier. Inside the placenta, the architecture is astonishing in its precision. The maternal side is made up of pools of blood, known as intervillous spaces, supplied by spiral arteries that extend from the uterine wall. Into these spaces project the chorionic villi, each lined with fetal capillaries. As maternal blood flows around them, oxygen and nutrients diffuse across the fine membranes into the fetal circulation. The reverse exchange happens just as smoothly. Carbon dioxide and waste pass from the embryo's blood into the mother's, where they are removed by her lungs and kidneys. This elegant system functions without interruption, 24 hours a day, driven by the twin forces of diffusion and pressure, guided by the needs of the growing child. It is, quite literally, the breath and nourishment of life shared between two beings. Beyond its physical functions, the placenta also acts as a gatekeeper. Its selective barrier allows beneficial substances like glucose, amino acids, and oxygen to pass freely, while blocking many harmful agents. Certain immune cells and large molecules are kept out, protecting the embryo from potential harm. Yet the placenta also allows the transfer of antibodies from the mother, providing the developing child with the first measure of immunity against the outside world. Through this passage, the mother's own history of encounters with illness is shared with the child, granting protection long before birth. It is an act of natural generosity, a biological inheritance carried not through words or memory, but through the flow of blood. The placenta is not merely an instrument of biology. It is an organ of communication. Chemical messages pass both ways, carrying signals that adjust the physiology of both mother and child. The embryo releases hormones that influence the mother's metabolism, increasing her ability to deliver glucose and oxygen. At the same time, the mother's body sends molecular cues that regulate the growth rate of the placenta and embryo. This two-way dialogue ensures that both remain in balance. It is a relationship built on cooperation, not dominance, but mutual adaptation. Within the stillness of the womb, this harmony plays out in perfect synchrony. Each heartbeat, each breath, each molecule part of the same living rhythm. As the embryo transitions into a fetus, the placenta reaches full maturity, growing to match the needs of the expanding life it supports. Its surface becomes a textured landscape of ridges and grooves, rich with capillaries and connective tissue. The umbilical cord lengthens, allowing the fetus to move freely within the amniotic sac, turning and stretching with gentle motions. Each time the heart beats, blood flows through the cord, delivering sustenance and carrying away waste. This exchange is constant, unbroken, and essential. The fetus floats in a world sustained by the unseen labor of the placenta, a world of warmth, rhythm, and security. In many ways, the placenta can be seen as the first environment of every human life, the original world in which we grow and from which we emerge. It is a landscape of nourishment and protection, both separate from and connected to the larger body of the mother. When viewed in this way, it becomes a symbol of unity, a reminder that all life begins, not in isolation, but in connection. Every breath taken after birth, every meal, continues the legacy of that early exchange. The same principles that govern nourishment in the womb, balance, cooperation, and flow, remain the foundation of life, long after birth. In some ancient cultures, the placenta was revered as sacred, seen as a twin or guardian spirit of the child. It was buried in the earth, or honored with rituals acknowledging the bond it represented. Though modern science understands its anatomy and function in exquisite detail, that reverence remains justified. For the placenta is no less miraculous in biological truth than in mythic imagination. It is both a lifeline and a symbol of belonging, the first connection each of us experiences, and the first to be gently severed at birth. As the weeks pass, the placenta's work continues tirelessly. It grows to nearly a pound in weight, matching the rhythm of the fetus's increasing needs. Its surface shimmers with vessels that pulse in time, with two hearts beating as one. The umbilical cord twists softly, coiling like a strand of music connecting mother and child in a continuous melody. Through this connection, every breath the mother takes, every drop of nourishment she absorbs, is shared with her child. Together they exist in perfect balance, two lives intertwined, moving as one through the slow currents of time. To imagine this moment is to see life at its most harmonious. The mother's heartbeat echoes through the walls of the womb, and the fetus responds, its own heart pulsing in time. Blood flows through the umbilical cord, red and steady, carrying the essence of one life into another. The placenta hums quietly with activity, unseen but constant, translating the language of biology into the music of continuity. In this silent symphony, life sustains life. The mother and child join not by thought or will, but by the deep and ancient rhythm of being. And in that rhythm lies the essence of existence itself, the giving and receiving, the exchange that defines all living things. The placenta and umbilical cord are nature's instruments of harmony, their song unheard but eternal, carrying forward the quiet truth that life endures through connection. In the calm darkness of the womb, this symphony plays on, unbroken and unending, until the moment when the child, nourished and whole, takes its first breath of air, continuing the same rhythm that began here, in the gentle music of the maternal heart. 15. Cellular communication and genetic guidance. In the deep stillness of the womb, as the fetus grows in perfect balance with the rhythm of its mother's heartbeat, a quieter, subtler harmony is taking place within each cell. It is an unseen symphony of communication and coordination, a conversation conducted not with words or sound, but with the language of molecules. Every cell in the developing body listens and responds to these chemical messages, ensuring that growth unfolds in the right sequence, at the right pace. and in the right place. It is here, in this invisible dialogue, that life organizes itself. The body's form, its functions, and even the unique traits that make each human distinct are shaped by these cellular exchanges and the genetic guidance that directs them. Within each cell lies the nucleus, a delicate sphere that contains the genetic material, the DNA written in a code so intricate and ancient that it defines all life on Earth. This code, made up of 4 simple chemical letters, carries the full set of instructions for building and maintaining the human body. Yet, DNA alone is not enough. It is the interplay between genes, signals, and timing that determines how these instructions are expressed. Not every gene is active at once. Some remain silent while others awaken in response to specific cues from their environment. This precise regulation is what allows a single fertilized egg to transform into a body composed of trillions of specialized cells, each one with its own purpose and identity. As development continues, cells begin to specialize through a process known as differentiation. In the earliest stages, every cell of the embryo is identical, holding within it the potential to become any part of the body. Gradually, through a series of chemical signals exchanged between neighboring cells, this potential narrows. Some cells begin to express genes that guide them toward becoming muscle, while others turn on genes for nerve, skin, or bone. This communication occurs through signaling molecules, tiny messengers such as growth factors, hormones, and proteins that move between cells, carrying instructions that shape their destiny. It is as though each cell listens for its part in a great orchestral performance, responding only when its unique cue is played. One of the most remarkable features of this system is its precision. Each signal travels a specific distance and is received only by cells equipped with the right receptors to understand it. A molecule secreted by one cell may tell its neighbors to divide more rapidly, while another may instruct distant tissues to begin forming entirely new structures. The strength of these signals, their timing, and their concentration all influence the outcome. Even the slightest variation can alter the course of development, a reminder of how delicately tuned the process of life truly is. And yet, despite its complexity, it unfolds with astonishing reliability, repeating itself generation after generation with near perfection. Within the embryo, countless networks of communication operate simultaneously. Some control the growth of limbs, others direct the patterning of organs, while still others establish the body's symmetry, the balance between left and right, front and back. These networks are built on gradients of signaling molecules that diffuse through the developing tissues, creating invisible maps of concentration. Cells read these maps and interpret their position within the embryo, determining what they should become. For example, a higher concentration of one molecule might instruct cells to form the spine, while a lower concentration nearby prompts them to form muscle. Through this simple but elegant mechanism, the embryo translates chemical gradients into physical structure, converting invisible patterns into the architecture of life. The genes themselves act as both guides and guardians of this process. They respond to environmental signals by activating or silencing in carefully orchestrated sequences. Some genes serve as master regulators, controlling entire cascades of other genes. One such family, known as the Hox genes, determines the body's layout from head to tail. These genes are arranged along the chromosome in the same order as the regions they influence in the body, a genetic mirror of the organism's form. When activated in sequence, they ensure that the head forms at one end, the limbs in the middle, and the tail at the other. The same set of genes can be found in nearly all animals, from insects to humans, revealing a deep continuity that connects all life through shared evolutionary ancestry. Beyond the genetic code itself lies another layer of regulation, the epigenetic landscape. While DNA provides the instructions, epigenetic marks determine how and when those instructions are read. These marks are chemical modifications to the DNA and its associated proteins. acting like bookmarks that highlight or obscure certain parts of the genetic text. They do not change the sequence of the code, but they influence how cells interpret it. Through this mechanism, two cells with identical DNA can become entirely different in function. One, a neuron transmitting thought; the other, a muscle fiber contracting in rhythm. Epigenetic marks are also sensitive to environmental conditions, meaning that even subtle changes in the womb, such as variations in nutrition or stress, can influence gene expression and leave lasting imprints on the developing body. The communication between cells extends beyond chemical signals. Electrical and mechanical forces also play a role in guiding development. As the heart begins to beat and tissues start to move, the gentle pressure and flow of fluids send cues that shape the growing organs. Cells can sense the stiffness or stretch of their surroundings, adjusting their behavior in response. This phenomenon, known as mechanotransduction, ensures that form follows function, that bones harden where they must bear weight, that blood vessels branch where oxygen is needed most. Even at this early stage, the embryo is not a passive structure but an active participant in its own shaping, responding to every influence within its environment. Communication also governs the balance between growth and restraint. As tissues expand, feedback mechanisms ensure that they do not grow without limit. Cells that divide send inhibitory signals to their neighbors, telling them to pause when enough tissue has been produced. If a region of the embryo is injured, surrounding cells release molecules that stimulate repair, restoring the pattern to its intended state. This self-correcting ability demonstrates the remarkable resilience of biological systems. Development is not a rigid blueprint, but a flexible process, capable of adapting, compensating, and healing as it unfolds. Meanwhile, the genetic and cellular dialogue continues to strengthen the connections between the body's systems. The nervous system begins to link with muscles, forming circuits that will one day control movement. The heart communicates with blood vessels, adjusting its rhythm to match the demands of growth. Even the endocrine system, the network of glands that regulate hormones, begins its quiet work, releasing signals that fine-tune metabolism and coordinate the activities of distant tissues. Every part of the body is both sender and receiver, part of a conversation that never ceases, not even after birth. At this stage of development, the fetus is no longer a mere collection of forming organs, but a unified system of communication, a body beginning to act as one. Within each cell, the same DNA continues to whisper the same ancient story, yet the outcome is infinitely varied, shaped by the interplay of signals that flow between all parts. It is a process that reflects the deeper nature of life itself: connection, adaptation, and cooperation. To imagine this scene is to see the embryo as a living constellation, each cell a point of light connected to others by invisible threads of communication. Signals flow between them like soft pulses of energy, guiding their movements and fates. The genetic code glows quietly within each nucleus, a script being read, line by line, ensuring that the whole remains in harmony. Though the embryo rests in silence, within it there is ceaseless dialogue, a living network of intention, coordination, and response. In the end, this great conversation is what defines life. Every heartbeat, every thought, every breath depends on communication between cells, between organs, between body and environment. What begins here, in the stillness of the womb, will continue for a lifetime. The same principles that guide the embryo's growth will later guide healing, adaptation, and learning. The body will remain a community of voices, each speaking the language of balance and cooperation. And so, within the quiet of development, life teaches itself how to listen to sense, to respond, and to remain in harmony with the world around it. 16. Growth, movement, and early awareness. In the gentle darkness of the womb, time moves in rhythms too subtle to measure. The fetus floats quietly within its protective chamber, nourished by the placenta, bathed in warmth, and carried by the steady cadence of its mother's heartbeat. Yet within this calm, life is far from still. Growth continues unceasingly, an ever-deepening expansion of form and function. Muscles strengthen, bones harden, and connections multiply within the brain. The body lengthens and refines its proportions. What was once a tiny cluster of tissues has become a small human being, perfect in its miniature completeness, yet still unfolding in slow, deliberate waves. This is a stage defined by harmony, a moment when growth, motion, and the first glimmers of awareness begin to intertwine. By the beginning of the 4th month, the fetus measures several inches from crown to heel. Its body straightens from the curled posture of early development, and the head, once disproportionately large, begins to balance with the torso. Beneath its translucent skin, muscles weave around the skeleton, giving shape and strength to the limbs. The bones, once soft cartilage, begin to ossify, forming calcium deposits that will become the sturdy framework of life. The spine elongates and strengthens, its vertebrae aligning in graceful symmetry, while ribs extend to encase the chest, creating a cage that protects the beating heart and growing lungs. Each of these changes is silent, yet full of purpose, a continuous act of preparation for the life that awaits beyond the womb. As the musculoskeletal system matures, movement begins to emerge. The earliest motions are slight, a flexing of the trunk, a gentle twitch of the limbs. These are not yet deliberate actions, but spontaneous responses to electrical impulses traveling through the developing nervous system. Over time, the movements become more coordinated. The fetus begins to stretch, to curl its fingers, to bring its hands toward its face. It may even hiccup, an involuntary contraction of the tiny diaphragm that ripples softly through the fluid around it. Each movement strengthens the muscles and joints, refining the communication between nerves and body. Though these motions go unseen and unfelt at first, they are a rehearsal for all future motion, the graceful choreography that will one day allow walking, reaching, and touch. Within the brain, growth proceeds with astonishing speed. The neural tube that once existed as a hollow structure now houses billions of neurons, branching and connecting in a vast network of pathways. The cerebral cortex expands, its folds beginning to appear, increasing the surface area that will later allow complex thought and perception. The brainstem, responsible for the most basic functions of life, already regulates the heartbeat and movement, ensuring the stability of the growing body. Electrical activity surges through the developing nervous system in intricate patterns, forming the first circuits that will one day process sound, light, and sensation. Though consciousness as we know it has not yet emerged, these flickering signals represent the earliest stirrings of awareness, the faint recognition of movement, the rhythm of existence, the beginning of responsiveness. At the same time, the senses begin their slow awakening. The skin, still thin and delicate, becomes increasingly sensitive to touch. Light pressure from the uterine wall or the flow of amniotic fluid can trigger subtle reflexes, a turn of the head, a flick of the hand. This tactile responsiveness marks one of the first forms of sensory experience, a wordless awareness of presence and contact. Around the same period, the vestibular system, in the inner ear, the organ of balance, starts to function. It allows the fetus to perceive orientation within the fluid environment, distinguishing up from down, movement from stillness. Though surrounded by darkness, it is already learning the quiet geometry of space. The development of the senses continues in harmony with the body's growth. The eyes, long formed, remain closed, protected by fused eyelids, but the retina has begun to respond faintly to light. Even through the darkness of the womb, subtle changes in illumination can reach the developing eyes, stimulating their early function. The ears, forming deep within the skull, connect to the auditory centers of the brain, Around the 5th month, vibrations from the mother's heartbeat, the rush of blood through her vessels, and the distant murmur of her voice begin to reach the fetus as muted sounds. Though muffled and distorted, these vibrations are the first contact with the outer world, the first hint that life exists beyond the soft boundaries of the womb. Meanwhile, growth continues throughout every organ system. The lungs, though still filled with fluid, branch into millions of tiny sacs, preparing for the day when they will expand with air. The digestive system begins to practice its motions as the fetus swallows small amounts of amniotic fluid, absorbing nutrients and excreting waste into the same liquid that surrounds it. This process, though simple, helps to mature the gut and the kidneys, ensuring that when birth arrives, the transition to independent nourishment will be smooth. The skin begins to thicken, and a fine layer of downy hair called lanugo appears, covering the body in a soft, protective coat. Over this, a waxy substance known as vernix forms, shielding the delicate skin from the amniotic fluid and keeping it supple. The heartbeat, once irregular, now follows a steady rhythm, strong enough to be heard through the walls of the abdomen. It beats twice as fast as an adult's, a quick and vital tempo that mirrors the intensity of growth taking place within. Each contraction sends blood coursing through the placenta and umbilical cord, delivering oxygen to every cell. The relationship between mother and child continues in perfect synchrony, her body adjusting constantly to meet the needs of the growing fetus. When she breathes, her lungs provide oxygen for two. When she eats, her nourishment sustains both. Through this exchange, the fetus not only receives sustenance, but also experiences the subtle shifts of the mother's daily life, the rhythm of her movement, the pattern of her heartbeat, the ebb and flow of her emotions. Movement becomes increasingly expressive as the weeks progress. The fetus begins to flex and extend its limbs, to open and close its mouth, to explore its own body with touch. It may bring its thumb to its lips and practice the reflex of sucking, an instinct that will later allow feeding after birth. The coordination of muscles and nerves continues to refine through repetition, turning randomness into rhythm. These movements, though simple, reveal a growing connection between sensation and response. Each action creates feedback within the nervous system, shaping the pathways of the brain and teaching it how to control the body. Even now, before consciousness takes form, the foundation of learning is being laid through movement and repetition. In the womb, the fetus is surrounded by fluid, yet it is far from passive within it. The amniotic sac allows freedom of motion, cushioning every turn and stretch. The mother's body moves and breathes, and the fetus moves in response, swaying with the rhythm of her steps, rocked by the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. These sensations, though subtle, imprint themselves deeply, providing the earliest experience of comfort and rhythm. The continuous motion creates a world of security and pattern, one that mirrors the steady cycles that will govern life after birth, the alternation of rest and activity, stillness and motion. The brain, in its rapid growth, begins to synchronize these patterns. Neural circuits responsible for sleep and wakefulness start to develop, and periods of quiet rest alternate with moments of active movement. During these times of rest, the brain processes signals, strengthens connections, and consolidates the experiences of the day. Even in the womb, the cycles of activity and stillness mirror the rhythms of later life, an internal rehearsal for the continuity of being. To imagine the fetus at this stage is to see a being suspended between two worlds, still enclosed in its liquid sanctuary, yet already responding to the gentle pull of existence. Its movements are both instinctive and purposeful, its senses dim but awakening. The brain hums with silent activity, wiring itself for awareness, memory, and emotion. It cannot yet think or dream as we understand those words, but it feels the world through motion, rhythm, and vibration. In this quiet awareness, the first relationship with life itself is forming. Growth, Movement and awareness are not separate phenomena, but one continuous process. The body grows through motion, the mind awakens through sensation, and life sustains itself through rhythm. The fetus, floating in the warm depths of the womb, embodies this truth. It grows without effort, learns without thought, and moves in perfect harmony with the world that surrounds it. Everything it becomes is shaped by this peaceful symphony, the music of heartbeat, the gentle rocking of the body, the pulse of existence itself. And so, within the darkness, the fetus continues to grow, unaware of time, but entirely immersed in being. Its world is complete, self-contained, and filled with the soft cadence of life. The quiet unfolding of growth is not rushed but steady, guided by the same patient intelligence that has shaped all living things since the beginning. Movement, growth, and awareness blend seamlessly, each one nurturing the other in an endless cycle. In this silence, the fetus learns the first and most essential truth of existence, that life, even in its smallest form, is both motion and stillness, expansion and rest, guided always by the gentle rhythm that began with the first heartbeat and will continue, unbroken, for a lifetime. 17. The senses awaken, hearing, touch, and light. In the dim stillness of the womb, where every sound is softened and every movement flows like water, a quiet transformation begins to unfold. The fetus, now well-formed and growing in strength, is entering a stage of awakening, not of consciousness as we understand it, but of sensation. The organs of perception, which have been forming patiently since the earliest weeks of development, now begin to open their channels to the surrounding world. Though protected within darkness and fluid, the fetus is no longer untouched by the environment. It is beginning to hear, to feel, and to sense faint impressions of light. The world beyond the womb, once entirely unknown, begins to leave its first gentle traces within the growing mind. Touch is the first of the senses to awaken. Long before the eyes or ears become active, the skin itself becomes an organ of perception. The skin is not merely a protective covering. It is a living field of sensory cells capable of feeling pressure, temperature, and motion. Around the 10th week of development, small regions of the body, beginning with the lips, palms, and soles, start to respond to gentle stimulation. As the nervous system grows more complex, these regions expand until nearly the entire surface of the body becomes responsive. The amniotic fluid, which once served only to cushion the fetus, now provides a medium through which touch can be felt. Every movement, every change in position, creates a subtle sensation that ripples across the skin. The fetus begins to react, shifting in response, curling fingers, or turning the head slightly. These movements are not yet conscious acts, but they are the first expressions of awareness through touch. The skin's sensitivity develops in layers. Beneath the surface, networks of nerve endings grow and branch, connecting to the spinal cord and then to the developing brain. Within the brain, regions responsible for interpreting sensation begin to map the body, a process known as somatotopic organization. It ensures that each part of the body has its place in the brain's representation, creating a continuous feedback loop between motion and perception. This organization will one day allow the newborn to distinguish between a soft caress and a firm grasp, between warmth and coolness. But even now, within the still waters of the womb, the fetus experiences touch as a kind of comfort, a dialogue between itself and the world that holds it. The mother's movements, the gentle pressure of the uterine wall, and the rhythmic flow of fluid all become part of this tactile symphony, creating a constant sense of safety and enclosure. Alongside the sense of touch, the sense of hearing begins to awaken slowly. Then suddenly, as if the world itself were revealing its rhythm. The ears have been forming for many weeks, their delicate structures spiraling into the familiar shape that captures sound. Deep inside the temporal bones, the cochlea, a coiled chamber lined with thousands of sensory cells, is now functional. Vibrations travel through the amniotic fluid and the mother's tissues, reaching the fetus as muted waves of sound. These are not yet distinct tones or words, but rhythmic pulses. The steady beat of the mother's heart, the flow of her blood, the murmur of her breathing, and the faint vibrations of her voice as she speaks or sings. The fetus responds to these sounds with subtle motions, a sign that the auditory system is translating vibration into perception. The brain begins to organize these sensations, distinguishing between low and high frequencies, between rhythm and silence. Over time, the patterns of the mother's voice become familiar. Even though the fetus cannot understand language, it recognizes the melody of speech, the rise and fall, the pauses and cadences that define her tone. This early familiarity forms the foundation for one of the most profound relationships in life, the bond between parent and child. After birth, studies have shown that newborns turn their heads toward the sound of their mother's voice, drawn to a rhythm they first heard in the womb. Thus, the sense of hearing is not only a biological development but also the beginning of emotional connection. Sound in the womb is different from sound in the open world. It is muffled, rhythmic, and continuous, more like vibration than distinct noise. Yet this softness has its own beauty. The womb is never silent. It hums with the steady pulse of life. Each beat of the maternal heart echoes through the body. Each breath creates gentle movement in the fluid. These patterns form the fetus's first experience of rhythm, a pattern that will remain imprinted long after birth. The heartbeat, especially, becomes a symbol of safety. Its repetition teaches the developing brain to recognize consistency, to find calm in predictability. In this way, hearing becomes the first bridge between the internal and external worlds, an introduction to the music of existence. As the weeks pass, another sense begins to stir sight, the faintest and most distant of the senses in the womb. The eyes, which have been closed and protected beneath thin eyelids, are now capable of detecting light. Though no direct light reaches the fetus, the mother's body allows subtle changes in brightness to filter through. When she steps into sunlight, or when the environment shifts from day to night, the glow penetrating the uterine wall changes slightly. These variations stimulate the retina, triggering responses that help prepare the visual system for future function. The fetus does not yet see in the way we do, but it perceives light as gentle pulses, perhaps experienced as warmth or soft color within the darkness. These early impressions shape the brain's visual pathways, laying the groundwork for perception after birth. The eyelids remain fused until around the 7th month, ensuring protection. While the eyes mature, beneath them, the retinas grow increasingly sensitive, and the optic nerves strengthen their connection to the brain. Within the brain itself, visual areas begin to organize, forming the neural architecture that will one day interpret light and form into image. Even before the eyes open, the brain rehearses the act of seeing, sending signals that mimic the patterns of perception. It is as though the mind practices awareness long before it can experience it fully, preparing, waiting, and building the structures that will make vision possible. While touch, hearing, and sight develop at different tempos, they are deeply interconnected. A sound may trigger movement. A shift in position may alter how vibration is felt. Light and warmth blend in ways that the developing brain begins to associate. The senses are not isolated experiences but overlapping languages, each enhancing the other. The fetus, though not conscious in the way an infant will be, begins to experience existence as a symphony of sensations, a continuous flow of texture, sound, and rhythm. Through this multisensory world, the nervous system learns to interpret, to respond, and to remember. Every experience contributes to the shaping of neural connections, making the brain a living record of everything felt within the womb. As the senses awaken, the fetus also begins to develop patterns of behavior in response to them. It moves more vigorously when startled by sudden vibrations, grows still when soothed by rhythmic motion or soft sound. It reacts to touch on the face by turning the head or to pressure on the body by adjusting position. These are the earliest forms of interaction, primitive reflexes that show awareness of environment. They are not yet controlled or deliberate, but they are expressions of responsiveness, evidence that the growing child is not merely being shaped by the world, but is also beginning to participate in it. The mother, too, feels this deepening communication. The first gentle movements within her, the quickening, as it has been called for centuries, mark a profound recognition. It is the realization that another being moves in harmony with her, responding to her heartbeat, her voice, her very presence. Through this exchange, mother and child are bound in a quiet dialogue that transcends language. Every sound she hears, every breath she takes, becomes part of the sensory world the child inhabits. In this way, her life becomes the first environment the fetus will know, her rhythms, the first lessons in pattern and continuity. To imagine this moment is to enter a world of softness and resonance. The fetus drifts in its liquid home, surrounded by darkness that is not absence but protection. Sounds echo gently through the fluid. Faint light shimmers through the walls of the womb. The touch of motion and stillness alternates in soothing cycles. Within this environment, the senses awaken one by one, each adding a new dimension to the unfolding awareness. Touch provides comfort and orientation. Hearing brings rhythm and familiarity. Light offers the first taste of the world beyond. Together, they form the earliest language of life, sensation as communication, perception as connection, and so, in the silence that is not silent, the fetus begins to experience the world. It listens, it feels, it drifts in the gentle rhythm of its mother's heartbeat, learning the textures of existence long before the first breath of air. Awareness begins here, not as thought, but as feeling a soft awakening to the truth that life is a continuous exchange between self and world, between inner being and the music of creation. In that quiet unfolding, the senses become the gateways through which the soul will one day perceive the beauty of life. 18. The final trimester. Strength and preparation for birth. The final months of life within the womb are a season of quiet power, when growth and refinement reach their most intricate stage. The fetus, once delicate and translucent, now possesses the strength and fullness of a nearly complete being. Each organ, each limb, each sense has been formed, and what remains is not invention but perfection. The gradual strengthening of systems, the accumulation of energy, and the serene preparation for birth. Within the deep, fluid chamber of the uterus, time slows into a rhythm of nourishment and repose. The mother's body and the growing child exist in perfect synchrony, their lives interwoven by the unbroken pulse of blood and breath. The journey toward the first breath of air has begun, though it unfolds with patient stillness. By the 7th month, the fetus measures nearly 1.5 feet in length and weighs close to 3 pounds. Its form is distinctly human, its limbs rounded with new fat that insulates and sustains. The skin, once thin and almost transparent, has become opaque, blushed with the soft pinks and reds of circulating blood beneath. The fine lanugo hair that covered the body begins to shed, while the waxy coating of vernix thickens, protecting the skin from the surrounding amniotic fluid. The muscles grow stronger, and movements become more deliberate. There are stretches, turns, and slow rotations, though space within the womb has become limited. Each motion now presses gently against the uterine walls, felt by the mother as subtle ripples or rolling waves beneath her skin. These movements are not random, they are the embryo's ongoing rehearsal for life outside, a constant refinement of coordination and response. The lungs, long in formation, enter their final phase of development. Until now, they have existed as branching passages filled with fluid, their structure growing more intricate with each passing week. In these final months, tiny air sacs called alveoli multiply rapidly, their delicate walls forming the surfaces through which oxygen exchange will soon occur. Specialized cells within these sacs begin to produce surfactant, a thin substance that prevents the lungs from collapsing after the first breath. Though the fetus does not yet breathe air, it practices the motions of respiration, drawing amniotic fluid in and out of its lungs in rhythmic patterns. These breathing movements strengthen the muscles of the chest and diaphragm, preparing for the day when air will flow through them for the first time. The heart, which has been beating since the earliest weeks, now works with quiet assurance. It pumps blood through a fully developed circulatory system, maintaining two distinct pathways, one for fetal life and another for the life that will follow. The fetal circulation is uniquely adapted to its underwater world. Small openings in the heart and major vessels allow blood to bypass the still unused lungs, sending oxygen directly from the placenta to the body. When birth comes, these passages will close in a miraculous transformation, and the lungs will take on their full role in breathing. But for now, the placenta remains the true source of life, a constant flow of oxygen, nutrients, and warmth from mother to child, unbroken and unending. In the brain, the final trimester is a time of exponential growth. The smooth surface of the earlier months begins to fold and crease, forming the intricate patterns of the cerebral cortex. Each fold increases the brain's surface area, allowing for greater complexity and connectivity. Billions of neurons reach out to one another, forming new synapses every second. The brain's activity becomes more organized, displaying patterns of sleep and wakefulness that follow gentle rhythms. During the quiet phases, the fetus rests motionless, floating in calm. During active phases, it moves, stretches, and responds to stimuli. These cycles resemble the sleep states of the newborn, including brief moments of rapid eye movement that suggest the possibility of early dreaming. Not dreams with stories or images, but sensations of rhythm, warmth, and sound remembered in the language of the body. As the brain develops, the senses grow more attuned. Hearing, which began in muffled resonance, now sharpens to recognize the nuances of sound. The fetus can distinguish between low and high tones, between rhythm and silence. The mother's voice remains the most familiar sound, its vibration soothing and constant. The external world also reaches the fetus in faint echoes: music, conversation, the hum of movement beyond the womb. Though the fluid and tissue of the mother's body soften these sounds, their patterns are absorbed, leaving imprints on the developing neural circuits. Sight, too, begins to mature. The eyelids, which have been sealed for months, slowly open. Behind them, the eyes respond to subtle changes in light, turning toward brightness and shadow. The womb, though dark, is not without light. Faint glows from the outside world filter through, giving the fetus its first sense of contrast, of illumination and dimness. The sense of touch, already refined, becomes central in this stage. The fetus explores its small world through contact, the touch of its own hands, the press of its limbs against the uterine wall, the gentle caress of the amniotic fluid. It grips the umbilical cord, opens and closes its fingers, and moves in response to pressure or vibration. These tactile experiences help shape the brain's sensory regions, creating the neural maps that will later allow perception and motor control. The mouth, especially sensitive, begins to practice the motions of sucking and swallowing, drawing amniotic fluid in rhythmic pulses. This reflex not only prepares for feeding but also brings comfort, a soothing rhythm that will continue long after birth. Within the digestive system, the stomach and intestines now function in near completeness. The fetus swallows and digests amniotic fluid, absorbing water and small nutrients, while excreting waste into the fluid that surrounds it. In the liver, glycogen reserves accumulate, storing energy for the first days of independent life. Fat stores build beneath the skin, creating both insulation and sustenance. The kidneys filter the blood, producing urine that contributes to the balance of the amniotic environment. Every organ is rehearsing for its role, each performing its silent duties in preparation for the transition to the outer world. The mother's body, too, undergoes its own transformations in these months. Her heart pumps more blood to meet the demands of 2 circulations. Her lungs expand to deliver oxygen to both herself and her growing child. The placenta reaches its full capacity, its villi branching into an intricate forest of vessels. The hormonal signals exchanged between mother and fetus maintain a state of delicate equilibrium, ensuring that both remain nourished and sustained. The mother's awareness of the child deepens with every passing day. Each movement she feels is a conversation, a reminder of the life within her, responding to her own rhythms, her voice, her heartbeat. As the weeks pass and the due time approaches, the fetus grows too large for the space that once allowed it to float freely. Movements become slower but stronger, deliberate rather than playful. The head gradually turns downward, finding its place near the cervix, guided by instinct and structure alike. The uterus begins to tighten in gentle waves, the earliest contractions which prepare the muscles for the effort of birth. Though still enfolded in the safety of the womb, the fetus senses the subtle change in rhythm, the quiet pull toward a new existence. The placenta, while still fully functional, begins to signal its readiness for completion, its cells releasing hormones that will soon initiate labor. The final trimester is not merely a time of physical preparation. It is also the culmination of harmony between 2 beings. The mother and child exist in a state of perfect mutual dependence, their bodies attuned to one another in every breath and heartbeat. The fetus has no awareness of separation. Its world is one of unity, of warmth and sound and motion. Every sensation, every rhythm, carries the reassurance of continuity. It is the last chapter of the hidden life, the last quiet phase before the great transformation of birth, the moment when 2 become distinct yet remain forever connected. To imagine this time is to picture serenity and strength coexisting. The fetus rests curled within the soft enclosure of the womb, surrounded by warmth, moving with slow confidence. The mother carries this world within her, her body providing shelter, sustenance, and song. Together they wait, bound by the same rhythm, preparing for the moment when the quiet darkness will give way to light. It is the stillness before emergence, the gathering of all energy and readiness. The final trimester is the completion of creation, the perfect balance between growth and waiting, motion and peace. And so, within that deep and timeless silence, the fetus continues to grow, its lungs ready to breathe, its heart steady, its senses alert. It floats in a world of harmony and rhythm, unaware of the great transition that approaches. Every beat of the mother's heart, every breath, every quiet vibration carries it closer to that first moment of air and light. Birth is coming, but for now, there is only stillness, the serene strength of a being complete in form, yet waiting in peace, poised between 2 worlds, listening to the eternal rhythm that began long ago with a single heartbeat. 19. The passage of birth. In the quiet sanctuary of the womb, where all has been softness and rhythm, a change begins that will transform existence forever. It begins gently, almost imperceptibly, a tightening, a slow pressure, the faint whisper of movement through the maternal body. After months of stillness and steady growth, the time of waiting draws to an end. The fetus, now fully formed and strong, rests within its liquid cradle, unaware that the patterns of life are shifting around it. This is the beginning of birth, the ancient passage that every human being must traverse from the silent world of fluid and darkness into the bright air of the living world. It is the threshold between two states of being, the journey from unity to individuality, from enclosed rhythm to open breath. For many weeks, subtle signals have been preparing both mother and child for this transition. Hormones, released by the maturing fetus, travel through the shared bloodstream to the placenta, signaling readiness. The placenta, in turn, sends messages to the mother's body, adjusting her own hormonal balance. Levels of estrogen rise, while progesterone, which kept the uterine muscles quiet throughout pregnancy, begins to wane. The hormone oxytocin, produced in the mother's brain, increases, promoting contractions. At the same time, prostaglandins soften the cervix, making it pliable and ready to open. Nothing is rushed. Nature proceeds with patient coordination, ensuring that mother and child are aligned in their readiness. The entire body becomes attuned to a single purpose, to bring life from the inner world to the outer. The process of labor unfolds in stages, each one a step closer to emergence. In the beginning, contractions are mild and infrequent, like gentle waves rolling through the mother's body. They are felt as pressure, a deep rhythm that rises and falls in cycles. With each wave, the cervix begins to open, millimeter by millimeter, allowing passage for the child. For the fetus, these contractions are not harsh but rhythmic, an echo of the familiar pulses that have always surrounded it, the heartbeat, the flow of blood, the movement of breath. Yet the sensations are new. The once quiet world begins to press and shift, the gentle boundaries of the uterus tightening and releasing, guiding the fetus toward its long-awaited awakening. Inside the womb, the amniotic fluid cushions and protects, but now even this soft world begins to change. The contractions increase in strength, and the pressure builds. The fetus instinctively curls its body into position, head downward, chin tucked, preparing for descent. Its skull, made of plates not yet fused, can mold gently to the shape of the birth canal, a design that allows safe passage through the narrow space. The body's design is ancient and perfect, evolved through countless generations to balance strength with adaptability. The mother's pelvis, too, is shaped for this moment, its joints flexible, its pathways aligned to guide the child outward. Every movement of her body and every motion within the fetus are part of the same silent choreography, synchronized through the wisdom of biology. The amniotic sac, which has enclosed the fetus since the earliest days, may rupture as contractions intensify, releasing the amniotic fluid that has been its home. This moment, often called the breaking of the waters, marks the transition into the active phase of labor. The environment shifts rapidly now. The once weightless space becomes narrower, more defined. The fetus feels the firm embrace of the uterus pressing it downward. Its heart rate quickens with the exertion, responding to each contraction with resilience. Though the journey is one of great effort, it is not one of fear. The fetus is guided by instinct, by the deep rhythm that has governed every moment of growth. As the cervix opens fully, the descent begins. The contractions come stronger and closer together, pushing the fetus downward through the birth canal. The pressure is immense, yet purposeful, directing the head through the curved passageway. The bones of the skull shift slightly to accommodate the journey, overlapping at the sutures, then returning to their natural shape after birth. The shoulders turn, the body follows, and the entire being moves as though guided by unseen hands. This journey is not only physical, it is also a transformation of state, a passage from dependence to individuality, from immersion to breath. Meanwhile, the mother's body performs its own extraordinary work. Her uterus contracts with strength and precision, muscles working in concert to guide the child forward. Her heartbeat quickens, her breathing deepens, and her body opens in response to the rhythm of life within her. The pain she feels is not the pain of harm, but the intense force of creation, a deep, primal energy that unites her with all who have given birth before her. Her focus narrows to the pulse of her body, to the instinctive movements that bring forth new life. The process is both physical and sacred, a threshold moment that binds two lives in shared endurance and transformation. For the fetus, the final moments before birth are a time of compression and awakening. The lungs, which have never drawn breath, are filled with fluid, but the pressure of passage helps expel much of it. The chest is squeezed gently as the body moves downward, preparing the lungs to receive air. The umbilical cord continues its steady pulse, carrying oxygen from the placenta until the very last moment, ensuring that the fetus remains sustained even as it transitions from one world to another. And then, after hours of rhythm and effort, there comes a final contraction, a moment of passage. The head emerges, followed by the shoulders and body, and suddenly, the quiet darkness is replaced by air, by light, by sound. The newborn takes its first breath, a single, monumental act that transforms the body entirely. The lungs expand, filling with air, and oxygen flows through the bloodstream for the first time. The heart's pattern shifts instantly. The openings that once allowed blood to bypass the lungs close, and circulation reorganizes into its postnatal form. The umbilical cord continues to pulse for a short while, bridging the transition between two forms of life until it is no longer needed. In the moments after birth, the newborn's senses awaken fully. The bright light and cool air are unfamiliar, yet they trigger a cascade of reflexes. The cry that announces the arrival, the movement of limbs freed from confinement, the instinctive search for warmth and comfort. The mother's body responds in equal measure, releasing hormones that flood her with calm and connection. The newborn is placed against her chest, where the familiar rhythm of her heartbeat continues to offer reassurance. The transition is complete, from womb to world, from silence to sound, from oneness to connection. The placenta, having completed its sacred work, follows after. It detaches gently from the uterine wall, its vessels closing as it is expelled. For months, it has been the silent mediator between two lives, the guardian of nourishment and breath. Now, its purpose fulfilled, it rests in stillness, a reminder of the unity that once was. The umbilical cord, too, will soon be cut, separating the child physically from the mother for the first time. Yet the connection they share remains unbroken, existing now in the unseen rhythms of bond and memory, of shared biology and love. The newborn's world is new and vast, but the continuity of the womb lingers. The rhythm of breathing replaces the pulse of the placenta. The heartbeat of the mother remains a steady sound, and warmth, contact, and comfort recreate the sense of security that has always been. Though the child is now separate, it is not alone. The memory of that quiet underwater world of rhythm, of voice, of touch lives on, shaping the earliest sense of safety and belonging. To reflect on this passage is to glimpse the essence of all creation, the movement from stillness into life, from enclosure into freedom, from potential into presence. Birth is not an ending but a beginning, not a rupture but a continuation of the same rhythm that has guided existence from the first heartbeat. The newborn's cry, often taken as a symbol of distress, is in truth an announcement of vitality, the sound of lungs awakening, of life asserting itself. It is the echo of that ancient rhythm now made audible, the music of being alive. In the quiet that follows, mother and child rest together. The air is filled with warmth, the sounds of breath and heartbeat once again in harmony. The passage is complete, yet the connection endures, a bond, formed in silence, carried through pain, and renewed in love. The journey from womb to world is one of transformation, but it is also one of continuity, for the same rhythm that sustained life before birth continues unbroken after it. It is the rhythm of the heart, of breath, of life itself, a reminder that even in change, there is always harmony. 20. The continuation of life, memory, bond, and growth. The moment of birth, though brief, marks the beginning of an unending continuum. It is not a break from the world within the womb, but an evolution of it, a gentle transformation of rhythm and environment. The newborn, cradled in its mother's arms, continues to move in harmony with the same pulse that guided its creation. The air it now breathes replaces the flow of amniotic fluid. The heartbeat it hears outside mirrors the one that once surrounded it within, and the warmth of skin against skin restores the safety of the enclosed world it has left behind. Though life has changed profoundly, its continuity remains. In this new phase, growth does not cease. It shifts from formation to experience, from creation to awareness. In the first moments after birth, the newborn's senses, long rehearsed in the quiet of the womb, awaken in full. The eyes open slowly, adjusting to light for the first time. The world appears as shapes and shadows, soft and blurred, yet the brightness itself is enough to capture attention. The ears, already familiar with sound, now hear with clarity the hum of voices, the murmur of breathing, the rhythmic thump of a heart pressed close. These sensations are not overwhelming. They are reminders of patterns the infant already knows. The voice of the mother, especially, is instantly recognizable. The newborn turns toward it, soothed by its rhythm, by the rise and fall of tone that has been a companion since the earliest weeks of existence. Touch, perhaps the most profound sense at this stage, becomes the language through which safety and belonging are communicated. The first embrace is not merely physical. It is an exchange of warmth, scent, and familiarity that tells the newborn it has not been abandoned to the unknown. The skin, long accustomed to the gentle touch of fluid, now learns the texture of the air, the contact of another body, the closeness of care. The act of holding, of skin against skin, stabilizes the infant's breathing and heartbeat, guiding its fragile body into the rhythm of independent life. Within this touch, there is memory, not conscious recollection, but a deeper awareness that recognizes the patterns of comfort and sustenance that have always been. The bond between mother and child, established long before birth, deepens now into active communication. Hormones flow through both bodies, enhancing connection and calm. In the mother, oxytocin, the same hormone that guided the contractions of labor, now fosters affection and nurturing. In the newborn, it brings stillness and trust. Eye contact, though brief and unsteady, begins to form the first exchanges of recognition. The newborn's gaze seeks the mother's face instinctively, responding to patterns of light and shadow, to the familiarity of expression. This bond, wordless yet profound, forms the foundation of all future relationships, the first experience of mutual awareness. In these early hours, the newborn's body adapts to the great transition from the internal to the external world. The lungs, once filled with fluid, now expand fully, drawing oxygen into every cell. The circulatory system adjusts. Vessels that once connected to the placenta close, and new pathways establish themselves. The digestive system awakens to its first nourishment, the sweet, antibody-rich milk that flows naturally from the mother's body. Each of these systems, long prepared in the womb, now begins to function independently. The transition is seamless, guided by biology's quiet wisdom. Yet even as the body adapts, the deeper continuity of experience remains. The rhythms of sleep and wakefulness follow patterns established before birth. The newborn sleeps in cycles that echo the womb's alternation of motion and rest, often soothed to stillness by rocking or heartbeat sounds that recreate the sensations of the prenatal world. The familiar becomes comfort, the steady presence of rhythm, warmth, and gentle sound. In these early days, the newborn's perception of existence is not defined by separation, but by connection. The boundary between self and world has not yet solidified. Life is still experienced as one continuous flow of being. Growth now proceeds along two intertwined paths, the physical and the perceptual. The body, nourished and sheltered, begins to gain strength, muscles firming, reflexes sharpening. Each movement, each grasp or stretch, strengthens the link between sensation and control. The mind, meanwhile, begins to organize its flood of impressions. The newborn does not yet think in words or concepts, but patterns are being laid, the recognition of sound, the expectation of warmth, the sense of presence and absence. These experiences form the earliest architecture of memory. Though the infant will not remember them consciously, they will remain embedded in the body's rhythms, shaping the quiet confidence or restlessness that colors future life. In the days that follow birth, the world begins to expand. The infant learns to associate the scent of milk with nourishment, the sound of footsteps with approach, the softness of blankets with rest. Each repetition strengthens the bond between perception and meaning. The voice that once reached it through the liquid walls of the womb now carries clearly through air, its tone and melody becoming a source of reassurance. The same songs, the same gentle speech, create a continuity between the two worlds. The infant listens, not with understanding, but with recognition. Its brain, newly wired for response, begins to synchronize to these rhythms, forming the foundation for language, for music, and for emotional attunement. The mother, too, continues to evolve through this process of connection. Her body adjusts to nurture, her heartbeat and breathing often aligning with her child's. When she holds her baby close, both bodies calm. When the child stirs, her own physiology responds in kind. This synchronization is not mere coincidence, but a continuation of the unity that defined their shared months. It is the body's way of remembering what the mind cannot fully express, that before they were two, they were one. The newborn's comfort depends not only on nourishment but on this deep emotional resonance, a bond that affirms safety and belonging in a world newly vast and unpredictable. In these early weeks of life, the infant's awareness begins to extend outward. The senses, once dulled by the muffled stillness of the womb, now open to an expanding universe. The contrast of light and shadow, the murmur of voices, the warmth of touch, all become the building blocks of understanding. The world is not perceived as separate objects, but as an interconnected field of sensations. Every experience is whole, undivided, absorbed with the simplicity of pure awareness. In this innocence lies the essence of being alive, the ability to exist fully in each moment, without division between perception and self. The memory of the womb, though fading, never disappears entirely. It lingers in the rhythms of the heart, in the instinct to seek closeness, in the calm that comes from being held. It lives in the preference for familiar voices, for gentle rocking, for the quiet hum of lullabies that echo the mother's heartbeat. These traces of the earliest life remain woven through every stage of growth, reminding the human being of its origins in unity and peace. Even as individuality strengthens, even as independence grows, the deep memory of connection endures. As weeks turn into months, the child begins to smile, to respond, to reach out with hands and eyes. These gestures, small yet profound, mark the emergence of self in relation to others. The bond between mother and child expands outward, encompassing family, sound, light, and movement. Growth becomes a dialogue with the world, a continual exchange of giving and receiving, of discovery and recognition. The same intelligence that shaped the embryo's cells continues to guide development, now through learning and interaction. Life builds upon itself, each stage carrying forward the essence of what came before. To contemplate this continuation is to see that birth is not the beginning of life, but one chapter in a seamless story, a transition rather than a creation. The rhythm that began with the first heartbeat continues through every breath, every pulse, every moment of awareness. The newborn's cry, the mother's touch, the unfolding of growth, all are part of the same song that began long before either could know it. Life, in its quiet persistence, moves forward through connection and memory, through the endless dialogue between self and world. And so, the story of embryology ends not with separation, but with continuity. The child, once enclosed within darkness, now grows beneath the open sky, yet the same forces guide it: rhythm, nourishment, and the instinct to connect. Every heartbeat is a reminder of the original rhythm that began in the womb. Every breath echoes the pulse of the placenta that once sustained it. Growth never truly ends. It simply changes form, from cellular creation to emotional expansion, from physical development to the unfolding of consciousness. The bond between mother and child, between past and present, between one life and the greater rhythm of existence, remains unbroken. In this way, the formation of life is not merely a biological process, but a reflection of a larger truth, that existence itself is continuous, cyclical, and deeply connected. The embryo, the fetus, the newborn, the adult, all are moments in the same flowing river, each carrying forward the essence of what came before. From the first division of a cell to the first breath of air, life reveals itself as a single, unbroken act of becoming. And in that becoming, there is peace, the quiet understanding that to live is to continue, to grow, to remember, and to remain forever a part of the rhythm that gave us life.